The June 12th meeting of the Durham Planning Board shall come to order. Roll call. We'll start on the left with Robert.
Robert Sullivan.
Tom DiCapo.
Sally DePias.
Paul Rasmussen.
Michael Barron, Town Planner. M. Friedrichs and Erica is tonight. Richard, is probably running late from traffic.
Peyton McManus.
Heather Grant.
All right. Rob, you're going to be seated into our open spot. And when Richard gets here, he can be Richard. All right. Agenda. I have this is the agenda. All right. Looking at what we have, I expect workforce housing. I really expect we could spend the whole night talking about that. So I want to put some blocks around it. So looking at our zoning, the table of uses item and the other business, I mean, it could go anything from we just not talk about table of uses at all and spend all our time on the workforce housing portion, or do we want to split it up between the two?
I mean, give a certain amount of time to
I'm going to need to cut our workforce housing discussion at some point,
Like an
and I would
hour
like
each?
to have an idea of how much time, when you would like that to be.
There's a Celtics game on tonight, but
I'd support the idea of pushing the table of uses to the next meeting.
If necessary.
Yeah, that sounds really
Okay.
good.
I agree.
Prioritize. Yeah.
In that case, we'll leave the agenda as is, and I'm going to reserve about 10 minutes at the end.
Okay.
All right, move that we approve the agenda as discussed.
Aye.
Did you see the,
Right.
did you see the alternate?
Yes,
I guess I was looking at something.
you were snoozing. That's okay.
So I was asleep.
Town planners report.
only that I think everyone probably knows by now that this Saturday is the Revolution 1774 event. It's been advertised a lot. I hope people can come and join us. It's really a cool event. It starts at 11 o'clock. It'll go till 4 or so, but come anytime, stay as long as you want. It's going to be on the old landing, just below the bridge, and parts of it are going to be in front of the General Sullivan House, just below the bridge, and there's going to be a per 30, and all town officials and town staff are welcome to join us out front to observe the parade. There's going to be fire, reenactors, music, speeches, and they're going to have. They were actually going to have a flotilla of boats leaving the landing to commemorate the raid on Fort William and Mary. I think they probably left by the landing, but it's low tide. So I think they'll have one boat out there. And the Conservation Commission met Monday, and they're continuing to work on the wetland and shoreland overlay district. I don't think anyone here was there. Right? Yeah, that's it.
All right. Reports from board members who serve on other committees.
I did HTC. They didn't do much. I think it was my first meeting, and it was like, 15 minutes? It was, they promised me they usually run a little longer than that, but that was fine with me. What Michael already shared about the Revolution 1774. So that's about it.
Town council?
Yeah, so the town council met on June 3rd. We had a presentation. One area that was some discussion on was to review those for special exception. Really, what did you want to say something? So I did a review of the, it had been a long time since I had read that section in the zoning, and it seemed like the way it was brought up was that the abutters and anybody that had concerns really didn't understand what was in the zoning, I think, itself. Because when I reread it, it seems fairly clear what the expectations of the homeowner would be in a short-term rental. So I didn't personally see that there was any activity that we would want to do on that unless there's further concerns that and more specific data that would come out of the zoning board of adjustment, but especially when you look at the list that we have of priorities now, so.
I spoke with the ZBA chair out in the foyer after his session, and his comment was, what I was able to draw out from him was that they really don't have any reason to not approve, it should just be permitted, that the ordinance itself is strong enough that there isn't anything else necessary. Any concerns that might be there are already in the ordinance, and as you said, must be followed anyway.
I think that would be
I
a
had
tough
asked him
one.
to, send Michael and I an email about that so that we could review the table of uses. And that might be one of the reasons why, if you look at, if we get to this table of uses there, the short-term rental line was highlighted, just for us to have a further discussion on it.
Yeah, I just know, I mean, I think that there would certainly be a lot of public comments on that, even though it's a very, I think probably a minor problem for very negatively if we tried to change that special exception. But I mean, more to come with that, however we want to. So the next thing, of course, is, and Paul was here, was that we had the review of the zoning definitions. So I don't think we got very far. I think it could have gone a little faster there in the beginning, but I think that as that dialogue starts to go, I think it could, get a little bit more comfortable for everybody.
We got through F, A through F.
A
I mean,
through F.
that's better than we usually do.
We got through C when we first got through it, so.
Well, it probably took us 3 months to get through A through F as the planning board, so maybe you're right. But anyway, yeah, we did it in one night.
Page 19 of 67.
And were there a lot of red lines or comments?
A lot of it was just more clarification. So what we sort of agreed on is that the council members were going to provide comments and questions to Mr. Barrett, and that way at the next meeting, he or I could actually respond to them, and they have them in front of them, and that might cut down a lot on what it takes to get through. Right now, it seems like it might be borderline of whether or not they have enough that they'll just send it back to us before they do their own public hearing. So we won't really know that until they're after their next meeting.
Okay.
Let's see. I think the other thing about the zoning definitions review is Todd was looking at where family came into play, and he had some, because he's had some comments on the fact that we might want to update that, and we just let him know it was in H, so we haven't gotten to H yet. I think it's under household.
Because it's under household.
Yeah, and then we finalized the town council goals, and there's a lot of it, so I'm sure that would be published after it was all cleaned up. There was a couple of comments left to be cleaned up on the document. There are several goals on items related to, long-term planning for the climate change goals. Find it. I had it in here. I had it to discuss. I don't know how could I put it. Okay, I can't find it. I had it in my notes here just to have right in front of me. But also, the goals for overlay district through would be great, which for us probably would be considered to address the housing shortage issue. And so when it's an actual release document, I'll bring it back.
Well before that, we'll get it done.
Well before that, yes, because, yes, we want to, fingers crossed, it's important to I think what the thing that was really good is it's mentioned twice in the goals, and I think that's, the fact that it has a deadline, it isn't just, we really like to see this, which we know could be up to a 3-year goal. We really know that everybody acknowledges that it's something that's very important, so.
It's not just an aspiration.
Exactly, we're at the point where it's a task to complete and get going on, so that's good.
Can I just add one? It's almost an update too. I went to the New Hampshire Housing Coalition. They had a housing and climate change that was on Friday. It was a couple of hours. It was very good. The breakfast, by the way, was very well put out. It was down at the Ashworth Hotel in Hampton, and it was very interesting because it had people from Portland. Portland is addressing in a big way their climate and housing issues, and they've adopted some interesting things that, I don't know, we are not going to be quite as horrifically affected by flooding here, but there are certainly parts of Durham that would, and then changing. So it was interesting to see how how housing and climate really do go hand in hand in the climate change, and how it's actually going to affect housing, making it more difficult. But for me, from the housing task force point of view, it really firmed up the idea of going to our different boards and talking about what are your concerns with housing from your perspective, especially in the Agricultural and the Conservation Commission, is like, what are your concerns with housing? Because it really talked about, we need housing in a big way, but we need to make sure we put it in the right place. Good. And I've gone to a couple. We've had, I think I've gone to 3 in the past 3 weeks. And I would recommend whenever these things come up, if you can arrange your schedule to go, it's worth it. There was a walk through Exeter last week, and a new development that's going on there. That's through the Housing Academy that I am a part of. And there was another one on multi-housing that was put on by New Hampshire Housing that was very interesting and really got into the developer side of it. Share one of the slides by zondahome.com, and they do statistical analysis and advise. If you get them in your, I think you shared them to the planning board, you should look at them. There's some really pertinent information in there that we should be aware of and go over.
Is that project in Exeter, is that partly affordable workforce housing?
Yes, yeah.
Are there any interesting things we might know?
Well, with that one, they had the zoning, and they ended up getting a variance because it was just commercial. It's on Epping Road, which is a commercial district. There are apartments and condos along that road, but step back, but this was zoned commercial. And so they needed to go to the town to get a variance, and it took them a couple of tries to get that. The ways they helped that variance through was they went to the area employers, like they have Ashram Tower, they have some, the hospital, and the hospital talked about the need for housing and how they would definitely recommend this place. So they got a developer that has done housing. There's one, I think, in Nashua is this most latest one, where there's a mix of market rate and affordable or workforce housing rates, HUD rates. And he talked about how they needed to go back and forth with the town on a few occasions so that they could get to that 60% is what they were looking at, the HUD rate, and going up and down with that and figuring out their numbers. But there will be, I think, 244 total units, and I don't know how many will be workforce, but it is a significant amount. And all the commercial, there is still commercial. The commercial is all up front on the property, and then behind are the garden-style apartments, which are those blocks of apartment buildings where you enter in and they go 3 or 4 stories. It's excellent location, so.
Welcome to Mr. Kelly.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. The record show at 7:15.
Yes.
Agriculture Commission met this past Monday. I unfortunately missed it because it conflicted with my daughter's graduation, but just agriculture community outreach project that they're working on, and are beginning to plan for this year's Farm Day.
All right. The IMAC committee also met. We met at Mr. Kelly's rear patio.
Here that it is.
And I updated them on what we're doing with workforce housing and the idea that we're looking for ideas for incentives in a way of boosting densities. And at our next meeting, we're going to talk about the future so that the stuff's not going into the landfills.
That would be an interesting incentive. We might actually be able to come up with a realistic number, considering the cost of waste.
when we get to that
yeah,
later on, yeah.
Could be interesting.
But what I asked them to do for the next meeting, and I was going to create like a chart, and pass it around where they could write down what they think, the different ideas for incentives they have, and whether it's a small thing or a big incentive thing, so that we can try to get an idea of how to balance them together. Because that's really what we're going to end up doing eventually, is trying to figure out how much incentive is each thing worth, right?
Yeah, because we got to give them a number.
Yeah. Any other committee meetings?
Yeah, the Conservation Commission met on Monday. You didn't discuss that.
I just told them they're continuing to work on it, but I'd say the specifics for you.
They have some reservations, some concerns, what they're bringing forward to us. And my advice to them was not to worry, it will all be well received. They're concerned actually on, how they will be received here in front of us. So, diverse opinion, and it's always,
We
encouraged.
welcome all the opinions, but they might not always get what they asked for.
Yeah, I think they're aware of that. Yes, Mr. Chairman. And in addition, the Jackson Laboratory expansion was discussed. So UNH was there. They're expanding their facility out there with meeting space, garage bays for maintenance on some of the watercraft that they have, as well as it's really a accessibility project as well. The building right now isn't accessible.
Just so everybody's clear, that's the facility at the end of Adams Point Road?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it was more of a courtesy visit like they do in front of us, because they didn't have to be there. Construction may begin, if everything goes, about a year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's everybody. All right. Public comments? Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom tonight? Okay. Be lots of DCAT reviews, I expect. Okay. Proposed zoning amendment to update the old map and lot numbers to the current ones in the Historic District Ordinance, requested by the Historic District Commission. And basically, that is literally all this is. The current historic and updated, and this is simply bringing the old lot numbers up to the proper new lot numbers.
So there's no adjustment to lines?
Exactly,
Okay.
and that's one of the reasons why
That wasn't very
this
clear
map
to
was
me.
provided this evening, is so that you can actually see this colored map is the old lot numbers, and then behind it are the new tax maps with the current lot numbers on them. So if you wanted to double check that, which I did do prior to this meeting, you can do so. I will warn you, there have been several lot mergers as well as a subdivision, so the lines don't match up between the old map and the new ones
Okay.
in all cases.
Yeah, there has been some.
If you did the work,
So,
I'll take your word.
Chair, does that mean if I were to, like, right now I've got the GIS pulled up and I'm looking at the historic overlay district. I guess the GIS would be referencing almost the new lot IDs. And then this is really just
Match
sort
up
of
to
matching
that,
that up with what we would currently see if we were to look online.
Yes, and the reason why that's important, I believe, is when you look at paragraph of 17593, if there's any inconsistencies between the map and the listing of map and lot numbers under subsection B, the written stuff takes precedence. And this written stuff now doesn't have anything, doesn't match up with anything.
Well, that was some nice cleanup.
How long has it been that way?
Since the tax maps were updated.
I guess that's what I'm asking then.
That's
2 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, approximately 2 years. Eric is a member of the Historic District Commission. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
I think you just did, in fact. Thank you very much, Mr. Lund.
And just to be clear, I know we've already touched on it, but So no additions, no deletions, no change of the map structure at all? It's just really just updating the lot IDs to what are now current lot
That is
references?
correct.
A little cleanup.
All right, so we'll need to send this to a public hearing. So if there's nothing else to talk about on it, we'll set a public hearing date for our next meeting. Does that sound good with everyone?
Yeah.
When is that?
That is June
June
26th.
That's coming up fast.
And if I could ask a question, Mr. Lund? Yeah. Sir, do you intend on going to that meeting as well?
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No.
Excuse me. You don't need to, but you're certainly welcome if you'd like to.
Right, yeah. At this point, I am available and expect to attend. But, yeah, Mr. Barrett would also be here and could provide backup if I do not make.
And it is a housekeeping item. It wasn't to try to coerce you in attendance. I just wanted to make sure that the 26th was a date that you could make should you desire to be here.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. All right.
All right. Anything else for this item? Thank you, Councilor Lund. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
All right, item 9, workforce housing, potential zoning amendment, discussion about rough draft, second iteration of a proposed workforce housing ordinance. We are reviewing tonight, and Mr. Kelly, based on our agenda, we decided that we would go and potentially, if this fills up the whole night, we'll go the whole night on this and skip the next item, and then just leave about 10 minutes to talk about other business.
Sounds good.
All right. All righty. Overall, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Barron for putting this together. I think it's really good for us now to have something like this in front of us. I also have a general comment I want to make. This is for you and anyone who ends up watching us. This is a wireframe, more along in development. There are dozens and dozens of dials that we could tweak on this machine to affect it in good ways and bad ways. I don't think we've even listed all the dials yet. And so now that we have this framework, we can start looking at those in more detail for as long as we have energy tonight. And as we go through it, I'll bring up some of the dials I think of. But for instance, some of these numbers, we might want to consider thresholds. Also, we have a correspondence that was on the table this
John
morning.
Randolph, that's
from John
actually
Randolph.
Pretty interesting.
He brings up a couple of points that I think should be thresholds,
Yeah.
and incentives, not flat numbers, for instance.
Yeah.
Well, that could be an incentive dial right there, right? Minimum 65%. If you do, maybe you get a bit, and that 65%, maybe it doesn't give you the full Church Hill density, maybe it only gives you part of it. You got to go a little higher to get that, and if you go even higher, you get something more, right? Those are things that we can talk about in balance in terms of trying to get what we see. But as we do this, we have to think about what is the absolute maximum density we think we can live with, and what's the minimum densities, because that's where those dials need to drop us, and the incentives need to drop us in. The definition, before we get into any details of the thing, would anybody else like to say anything? Since I just spent so much time.
No, I was actually going to ask you about that, the note from John Randolph, because I think he does bring up some points that are worth discussion,
Yeah.
for sure.
So when we set up the workforce housing definition the first time, it was like the first thing we did when we were trying to fill in the rest of this draft. And we spent a lot of time on it, and finally we kind of said, all right, just we'll do this and we'll look at it again later. Now that we know more about what's behind it, I think we need to review the definition a a little more thoroughly, because I think it conflicts with a lot of the things we're trying to accomplish. And when I say that, I say it because by referencing, our goal here is to put in affordable housing for a variety of HUD levels and categories. And this is saying workforce housing only qualifies if it belongs to 2 of those specific HUD levels, and just generically say HUD levels, or as being the affordable targets that we're using, so that if somebody wants to do it for a family of, instead of being, for rentals, instead of 60% for a 3-person household, well, what about 80% for a 4-person household? And things like that. We want to be encouraging that variety workforce housing. If something says, oh, you have to be workforce housing, and our definition doesn't allow that particular HUD level, then I think there's a conflict.
And something that being at the multi-unit housing thing on last Friday, that was interesting, because they had property management there, and I never really thought of the importance of the property manager and how they make sure that the facilities, these buildings, that these affordable units that they're building are meeting their compliances that they have for any grants that they're getting from the state, and many do that. And one of the things was they had the flexibility, and I think Michael Mulhern brought it up at the Housing Task Force because he was there as well, is called income averaging, where when they're locked in, if they have a more flexibility to stay within HUD limits, they can do income averaging when it comes to rentals. And so I say, income averaging means if I'm taking in this person, if I take in these 2 people at 100% AMI, I can then, because I'm averaging the total incomes, I can then stay like in 60. Logically, they could have somebody paying $500 a month for the same apartment as somebody paying $2,500 a month for the same apartment in the same facility, but because they average out the total, they're able to meet these compliances and then therefore open it up to more people that have a greater need for the housing at a lower income rate. So it's interesting, to realize that when we're locking too firmly into things, we're not giving the people that know what they're doing the flexibility to do what we should try to make it more flexible.
So does that mean we should just be starting at the beginning, and then when we get to that, figure out how to line that around?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to do, and since the definition was first, I wanted the definition first.
We may either not need,
If we don't need the definition, then and if we can live without it, then I'd say let's remove it, because the definition just might get in the way.
I think it would probably be better to eliminate it, because we're doing it a little differently than the state.
Plus, I
And
think,
that could be confusing if we keep
Yeah.
it.
well, also just the paragraph in general, at the end of every sentence, we go back to reference the HUD, and we say it like several times there, rather than maybe, depending on, if we're taking out all of the different percentages anyway, maybe it's different, but is maybe to bullet point, or take the paragraph just a
Well,
little
maybe
bit
just
differently.
eliminate it for now. If we find we want to put it back later, we could do that.
We might come up with a better one as we go through.
Yeah, because the state's definition is, it's problematic.
You can't build on it.
Okay.
So if we eliminate it, then all of the specifics would be brought out in the ordinance itself. And then
Which makes sense.
then we can deal with it in the details of the ordinance, and we don't have to sort of have it up front. And if we want to then define it,
Yeah, if you find that's useful.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on page 1?
Well, I'm trying to remember why I put item 2 in there.
That's why I have a big question mark right by there, because there's absolutely nothing different
It's
to
the
it.
same, so I delete that unless I remember something useful about it.
Article.
It's only senior, it's the only one.
Oh,
for that
now, all right, so
person.
you're wondering, why are we doing personal wireless service facilities? The only reason I'm doing that is because to make the numbering work a little better. So mine.
Oh, to make our internal numbering.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, to
And
make the
the-
numbering. It's
So
just shifting.
You
the
kind of threw like
numbers.
a placeholder in here, or
well,
a
'cause-
an already defined placeholder so that you wouldn't mess the numbers?
Well, we don't, we'd have to get into 106.1 and all that. It's a small thing to do, just to give us a clean number.
Okay,
It's just housekeeping.
all right. All right.
Okay. Then that gets us to page, anybody have anything on page 2 before I go?
I just had a cleanup thing for Philip A, item B. I just put ensure availability of diverse supply instead of the continued availability of diverse supply.
Right.
It's,
Yeah, we're
The
not
continued
continuing
isn't.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then but I didn't understand C, item 3, very clearly in terms of, I understand trying to describe those areas, but when it said this does not include the section of Mass Road located on the blah, 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 I didn't understand what that meant.
Oh, there's
Okay.
another portion.
I didn't either.
Mast Road comes out of Lee, hits Main Street, and then continues across Main Street and hooks into the campus. So there's that extra section of Mast Road, which is actually, I believe, in Moodor,
Across
is what's
from
being talked
Main
about.
Street?
Next to the horse barns.
Yes.
Oh.
where all the
Oh,
horse-
yeah, yeah,
Oh, that little
yeah.
road?
Okay.
Yes,
That-
that's Mast Road as well.
Okay,
So,
So the other way to think of it is Mast Road west of Main Street, not east of Main Street.
except for a little
There's
tiny
2 or
pocket
3
where the kennel is,
It's
the
not
dog training
developable.
lady.
Most of it is university land, our apartments.
Yeah, it was back there a couple years ago, so I think it was prior to COVID, that went,
It, yeah,
so there's nothing back there available anyway.
yeah.
So why do we call it? Is there anything?
So that, in the old, before the you and my days, that was the Concord Turnpike.
it went straight through
Went
Durham.
from Portsmouth to Concord.
Oh,
A very long time ago.
But it's still shown that on
The old
maps.
Concord Pike.
Really?
It's unclear where Main Street ends and Concord Turnpike. I can't tell from the maps.
okay.
And
Maybe
of
it
course,
isn't Mass
we're talking
Road.
road that isn't Route 4 now.
Right, right.
Some of
It's
it's on
Main Street.
paper now only, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Memories.
Okay.
You know, it's like old Piscataqua Road used to be part of the Concord Turnpike as well, I believe, right? When Route 4 came in and
Yeah,
then took that out of our downtown,
Was that the Kings Road they called it? Way
it
back?
might have been called that at one point as well. Anyway,
anyways.
Whatever.
Anyway.
But it's not necessarily clear.
Yeah, do we need to keep that Concord?
Maybe we
Turnpike?
don't, maybe we don't even need it. If we're saying the northerly side, do we just not have to say this
Oh,
other
yeah,
thing?
it maybe is, because it says all the land zone Orly, so, yeah, that's probably, we probably can delete that in
Yeah, because I think it's
parentheses.
just going to add,
though it is, when you look, when I was looking at the map, it was a little difficult to figure out, because of all the lines, patch marks, because it's university, where Moodor started and ended
Right.
with regards
Oh.
to that section.
Yes, we delete that, because it does say Orly north of Mass Road.
yeah,
Yeah,
that would be, I
right,
think, clear.
right.
And that's,
Okay.
those are my
It
concerns.
is
for this.
superfluous.
So what do we delete?
Three.
On C3,
The
Yes,
exclusion.
this does
Yes.
not,
Yes, that, and is this map includes this area here, that would be included?
Yeah, we'll have a
Yes.
more professional map, but that's the boundaries.
Okay.
Inside the black lines.
Inside the
Heavy
black lines. That's what it looks like.
And does that include the Moodor that's?
No.
So it's just the area inside the black lines, not any of this?
Orly. And there's a little extra piece to the far right that's Orly.
And that is all west of the train tracks.
Right.
Yes.
106AA, provide reasonable and realistic opportunity for the development of workforce and affordable housing.
And the reasoning?
Reasoning is more along the lines of, you know, some people, when they hear workforce housing, are thinking low income only. Or they hear, and I want to get I want to start pushing the idea that workforce and affordable are sort of an intermixed range of things. We're not just looking at one end or the other, we're talking about the whole gamut here.
Yeah.
And I think that helps clarify what, the whole meaning is.
And I think when Ryan Pope was here, I missed that meeting, but I watched it, and they used the term affordable, which is different than workforce.
Were they using that?
Yeah, I think he was consistently using affordable.
I think you're right.
And that was a subtle difference, but it's important, I think, and then I would agree that it makes sense to change the perception of what that implies.
And you can call it workforce district or affordable housing district. There's subtle differences, but
In the sentence, I want to start blending in the details. Do we want to change the name of the overlay district? I don't know. I hadn't really been thinking about that, but right now it's a HOOD. You prefer an AHOD?
AHOD, I like AHOD.
So would
think
you
it
just say,
works
would
for
that
now.
just say for the development of workforce and affordable housing?
Yes.
Or workforce slash.
or what?
Do you want the slash or the and?
How about affordable?
I would say and
workforce housing?
affordable.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
But then you're insinuating that they're
Two
different
things.
things.
Yeah, two
The
different
slash,
things.
I
They're,
like-
they're
actually like the
overlapped
slash.
and related, and
Well, affordable workforce housing sounds like you're putting two adjectives on the same piece of property.
I just think,
Low income, super low income, very low, or very low income as well.
So if you've spent $250,000 becoming an engineer, your first year of pay is, you're considered low income. Okay, so.
so what did we decide,
But
slash or and?
I don't know, because I hear the word affordable, people are always saying affordable, in reference to workforce housing. I think that your idea of education, but I guess I'm thinking back the other way of education.
Affordable is affordable to an individual or to an individual household,
Yeah,
right? And workforce is impersonal.
this is where the buildings, where the tenement buildings, where we have put these people.
yeah, which is
I wish we had an old mill to work with, right?
I think and affordable housing works great, and we can
And
wrestle over that forever.
and
With
now
and-
someone said, do we want workforce and affordable or affordable and workforce? Does it really matter?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
well, if you use them both, I would go workforce and affordable.
Okay.
okay.
And sorry, I just one question on that. Is there any, say, language that we bump into if we modify that? If we say it one way or the other, is there anything that we would encounter with any state regulations or any state?
No.
Okay.
No. We can and we should do what Durham can and Durham thinks is appropriate. And there's a lot of flexibility in this, in a particular prescribed way that the state uses in their definition. That's just fine.
Okay.
And if we are ever challenged on compliance with the state law, I believe that Durham would do just fine. That's my professional opinion.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, and I agree, Paul, with your changes.
Paul, if I may, I just want to add one comment to it as we go forward. I feel it's important that these projects do serve the goal of creating living space for the workforce.
Yes.
So I guess I was, with that change, I would still myself be vigilant in making sure that we have terms in here that try and ensure that goal.
Good.
I would agree with that.
And along those lines, is it worth adding another purpose, speaking specifically about the workforce?
No.
We're talking about what affordable means?
We could
I mean, if we feel we need, that might be the purpose of a definition,
reference HUD
Fine,
numbers
why
or.
not?
to rent or live in a space that's not costing them more than 30% of their annual income.
Yeah, something to them.
But, I mean, and that would be, if we're going to add something along that line, I could see that adding benefit, but potentially.
Personally, I don't feel it's necessary for purposes of this purpose statement.
And it was, if it would be worth saying there, when we talk about workforce, we're talking about teachers, firefighters, nurses. public-
No, don't name them.
All right.
because
No,
We're gonna-
no, avoid, that is definitely something that needs to be
We'll
avoided.
forget to put in payroll specialists and then we'll mess.
I mean, what
We
we
won't
have,
have town clerk in the list, and we won't, and then guess who gets angry,
Bank
right?
tellers.
And to that point,
Harry-
just I think that the gist of the discussion there makes sense, but I think that that would take place as more of an educational thing that the town might do, or and educational, posters and other things and other content relating to who's benefiting from this.
The Housing Task Force put that in Friday updates last month.
Yeah, and we don't include it here, that would just be an outreach.
Yeah, and we're gonna have a poster with that.
so this whole
Poster.
purpose section is basically a copy of the one from the conservation subdivision.
Oh, is it? That made it easy.
What is?
Is that where it is?
Yeah, it's in the, it's called workforce housing option. And then the purpose says the purpose of this section is to provide an option for including workforce housing in
There you
conservation
go.
subdivisions.
Yeah, we
So
had
the
that.
only thing missing is in conservation subdivisions, but the bullets 1, 2, 3, and 4 are pretty much the same.
But do we lose?
Which is fine.
Do we eventually lose some of that once this is adopted? No? It
Well,
will stay?
that's a good question. I think that the section division is not very useful. It's never been used.
That's
At
because we
some
didn't have a
point-
It's not
density
buildable.
requirement, I thought, at the end of this.
Oh,
bill.
we'll actually change, we'll come to that.
Yeah.
It seemed, I suggest changing one thing. At some point, worth playing with the numbers or getting rid of it, I don't know.
I
This
would-
is where the action is.
I would say on page 2.
So if I understand B correctly, we're removing the word continued,
Yes.
and it's just ensure the availability. Well, in that vein, do we want to, in C, remove meet the goal and just put that provide instead of providing? The purpose is to provide
Oh,
an adequate supply
right.
of affordable housing.
Yeah,
Right.
that's better.
So how
Or
would you?
as recommended, or,
Meet
well,
the
as set
goals.
forth.
What, meet the goal to provide an adequate or?
No, I'm
Do
just
we
saying
just say
provide. You start with
provide
the.
an
Oh, providing an
action of Provide
adequate.
an adequate supply.
All right, do we need D? To me, D doesn't add anything.
Or we could make a reference to the town's housing needs assessment.
Well,
Oh, 4 we should keep that because, that's a key thing they would point to, and we can say, no, we're very specifically aware of that.
I think it's true, because I think understanding the fact that this is a need that we're addressing that's flowing from New Hampshire through the Stratford Regional Plan, and then to us, it's all data and needs and pushing to do this and address this as soon as possible, not 10 years from now, like we've been doing. I think it makes sense.
For that, and I think we should add here, and the town of Durham housing needs assessment 2024.
The
Well,
RKG report.
Yeah, is
Right.
that all right?
I mean,
I don't
I think
know.
it makes sense to just sort of bake in some, for doing that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think we lose anything by adding that.
Yeah, and by adding it, if we're ever challenged in education, these are the things, we're taking this seriously. These are all the things we look
Yeah,
at.
and especially when pertaining to the Stratford, it's a regional problem. We don't have domes over our different, towns. What affects us affects them, and what affects them affects us. And certainly what affects, the lack of supply in Durham certainly affects the supply in Dover and in Somersworth, because that's I work in Durham, but I can't live here, so I got to go there. So it certainly does affect, everybody's affected by each other. And we are all in this together. Educational thing to remind people in this town that this is not just something we can say is not our problem. It's somebody else's problem, because it's all our problem.
Oh, and the thing about the Durham Housing Needs Assessment probably should go under 3. So provide an adequate, or C, but 3.
C.
An adequate supply of affordable housing is set forth in the town's master plan and the Town of Durham Housing Needs Assessment. So that's local, and there's the regional stuff.
That makes sense.
All right, but then you bring up a good point now. So, because with C, applicability, the bullets begin with 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'll
With
change
A-
that to 1, 2, 3.
All right, so you are going
under
with the
A,
numbers.
yeah.
Okay.
When I read address the regional need for workforce housing as what I'm looking for there,
Where?
a little more detail, you know, so we reference or
Well, it's-
claim that we needed. So-
It was published, and it's here somewhere.
Oh.
The document, it should have been in
I'll
our,
forward that to
But what I mean is that someone
If you're
reading
reading
this,
this,
I don't
he knows what
understand
it
why.
says.
Okay, I totally don't get why and how and what kind of problem it really is just from having that list
you know,
of
that
things.
published document should have been put in the folder, if not under the planning section, certainly in the housing task force section, because that's when we got that, was really part of the first phase of data.
Yeah, we've had that for a
And it
while,
was,
too.
it was
The
a
house
really,
on the website, but I'll check.
yeah, it just would be good to be able, either have a link to it that links to the Stratford, but it was a really important document. It's only been published in the last few
Yeah,
years.
well,
so.
and I might be, you know, I might be just chasing tails here, but, because it is
It is
just
hard
in
to
the purpose, but as a member of the community, you know, are confused by why we think so, you got to go research it yourself.
It's
Should I
hard to
include a
find
link
that stuff.
here
A link
to
would be
those?
really good.
What if you had a link to it?
That might be helpful.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a link to it would be good, because I think some people would say that, oh, there must have been a plan somewhere that said this was important.
That's all you did, as long as you trust it, but not
And
everybody.
most people would go there, but there are those people that will say, well, what are they talking about? You know, I mean, even as it was, we had people that challenged when the
Right.
Stratford County came out, the Housing Task Force was challenged in our acceptance of some of the information in there and told not to repeat it.
So I'll
Well, we
include a
got that.
link to all those, the master plan, the RKG report, and the Stratford Regional report.
Okay.
You know, I hate to do this to you guys, but, so under the definition of workforce housing, we said, broad range of places to live for both owners and renters, meeting needs of families and individuals that represent a diverse workforce.
Where is that?
Are we back on
I Googled.
page 1?
I'm on page 1, back where we said, what about New Hampshire housing?
Oh, yeah, New Hampshire Housing has a definition.
So so if we didn't have this
Oh,
paragraph, if we had, you know, workforce housing is a broad range of diverse workforce.
Wouldn't hurt.
I'll write that down and send it to you.
Yeah.
If you could email, yeah, if you could email that to me.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Are we moving on to page 3?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry about
Okay.
that.
See, we can go through pages.
So section C, applicability, no comments on that?
Number 3.
Right.
It's just, yeah, sentence there.
All right. So E, housing units.
Oh, what are we doing about the workforce housing option under conservation subdivision?
And I'm just saying that's entirely separate from this.
Okay, it is entirely separate.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to look at that.
You
though.
may want to delete it or change it in the
We're going to
future.
have to look at those subdivision.
What does that even mean? The conservation subdivision?
There is a section in the conservation subdivision, okay, which provides a workforce housing option. It is so weak, nobody's ever activated it
She can't build affordable.
because what it basically does is it gives you the same density and it's like, no, you can't, nah.
There's some that said it's a 20% incentive for density.
And keep in mind, the 20% means that if you're doing this in RC, 3.5 acres, you can do 1 unit for every 3. Even to get 1 additional unit.
It's dysfunctional.
Anyway, I don't think.
Just lose D.
I
and put
just, yeah, well, as long as we have that in there, it's, if we don't state it's irrelevant to this, people will be confused.
So just keep it
Or,
there.
we could just eliminate it from that might be the easiest.
If we-
thing. You could do that.
I
All
think
right, so if we take D out, then we should take that whole other section out as well at the same time.
What other section?
Out of the conservation
Out of
subdivision.
the workforce part.
Oh,
of the
remove it
conservation.
from the, yeah.
All right, because we don't want both of them in
Agreed.
there, and then, as Michael's saying, well, we're trying to do both at the same time. No, you're not. It's one or the other.
Which we were
I
going to
guess-
table
Wait, on
until
the-
we were done with it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I would leave it alone in the conservation subdivision.
You know-
Because it's in there, you know.
That's not a reason.
Well,
That's
there-
not a strong
But I
reason.
Well,
think
but you may want to look at that because this work for a project, a big project that is mostly, if not all, workforce housing. Most workforce housing really is developed as an incentive.
Okay.
It's a 20%, you get a bonus. So I would keep that because you may want to revisit that and increase the bonus. And that would still operate
So
separate
should we
from
just
this.
table it till we get through?
Yeah, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what you suggested
That's what I
earlier.
suggested earlier.
And I think that's a good
And the
idea.
idea, and the idea of the D paragraph here is to make it clear that people should not try to combine the two.
Well, this is what I was thinking, though, because when I first read this, D, I started making all kinds of notes on it, because I'm like, what are we saying about this, that none of the provisions, it's like it took totally what...
Maybe we should,
So-
yeah,
So
that
if we
could be
delete it
stated
here,
better.
because we've got it, we're addressing it maybe on page 6, so that's what confused me, is like, oh, I got all the way through this after making a bunch of notes on D to only find that we had a conservation subdivision slight change, which to me made sense.
Well, clear. But I do think we need to somehow state that's a totally separate provision. Don't confuse them or overlap them. Because otherwise, people will be confused.
Or
I
we'll
was
try-
already confused.
Or someone
so-
will come in and try to overlap.
Or
it.
they'll try to do both.
Just say
of them.
that straight out. I mean, just say this. Don't explain what it is. I would suggest just say, have a section here that says, this article is separate and independent from that article.
Well, that's
and
a
you
better
cannot-
stated.
And you cannot, you cannot
Mixed
attempt,
two.
yeah, you cannot, it's
Can't
one
be
or the other.
utilized in conjunction with
Yeah,
one
it cannot
another?
be used in conjunction with.
All right.
Utilized, and so you would, that would be the end of the sentence. The
Yes.
provision is entirely separate from this overlay district and cannot be utilized in conjunction.
One cannot be used in conjunction with the other.
You can state that again, or I can just get that off DCAT.
Okay,
Richard-
get it off DCAT.
Looks like Richard's typing.
I'll just get that statement off DCAT.
Well, maybe even just put, it's 175-107.1. Housing option 175-107.1 is a separate, whatever you guys said.
Yeah.
Because then if you're referencing that, people will see, oh, okay, that's a different application.
Yeah, I'll get your language from DCAT. Oh, another thing I just noticed is that the 3 unrelated rule does not apply in the OR and Orley zones. So we should probably
No.
state somewhere in here that that would have.
No,
May I?
But it would, but if it's in the portion that's in residence coastal, it would. Because this is partly residence coastal, partly OR, partly Orley. So if you're developing like this lot, it's 3 unrelated.
I think we should eliminate it.
We can't just get rid of 3 unrelated until we have something.
No, I was going to suggest putting in, added no OR and Orley, or you could put in this ordinance that also applies for any project, 3 unrelated.
The whole point, so a major portion, and this goes to what Tom's trying to defend here, is that your young workforce, even with these apartments out there, are going to struggle. You're starting engineers making $35,000, $40,000 a year.
Yeah, we had 3 roommates, you know.
You know,
started out.
it is important for people in that part of the workforce to be able to.
I agree.
So if you don't, but just keep in mind that this overlay district and Orly and Residence Coastal
The overlay-
it applies everywhere or doesn't apply?
Correct.
Well-
Keep
I don't
in
know why
mind,
we just didn't change the zoning there.
keep in mind, and this is the way that Todd has been defending our use of the 3 unrelated in Concord. It's there to keep students from overtaking our residential neighborhoods, right? Well, in a workforce housing development, we're putting in other protections to keep the students out. We don't need 3 unrelated.
It's not going to be in an existing neighborhood.
It's not going to be in an existing neighborhood. It's, some of the people we're going to be looking for, I mean, are going to be people who are trying to get back on their feet after a struggle or a failure of one sort or another. And, you know, they're going to need, I mean, as opposed to the low-income housing tax credits and stuff, the other option is, hey, I get 3 of my buddies together and we can do a somewhat nicer place together as more of a group house type thing.
Well, you can state with a project developed under this ordinance, you know, the 3 unrelated rule does not apply.
Why do we even have to say it?
I
Have
wouldn't
we-
even apply-
Why are we
Well,
talking?
or you could be silent. The only thing is, you could just be silent on
It's
it.
gonna
And if
come
someone
up.
does something on the RC, it would apply. Maybe
It's
just
going to come up in,
ignore it.
I think it's going to come up, but I think what we need to understand here is that right now the town does have that where it has it. And Todd has already, the town of Durham has already dodged a bullet, not to be crude, but has dodged a bullet on the state side this year when the state pushed down an amendment that would completely dismantle any 3 unrelated rules in any town that had them. But this is the second time it's come at the state. So the idea that it's going to continue to that 3 unrelated, that we're going to be able to continue to use that going forward, is dreaming. We need to be prepared. Instead of freaking out and going to Concord and say, got to keep it, we need to be prepared to have some board chairs to please, we need to maybe start looking at an education on the side of the town to explain to people how are not the only people that have wild, crazy parties in the world, and that there are apartment complexes all over the places, and it's part of their lease. So there are things that can be, have them. Everybody has them. Condo associations have them. All kinds of people have them.
So do you think, so you could say here.
We can't just lose it right
The
now.
3 unrelated doesn't apply, or you could be silent, in which case it would just apply in.
Standing at reality level. That's my
One
opinion.
more,
Is
one more
the
comment.
concern there that the high probability development here would take place in that RC?
I think there's a
Yeah.
good chance, but hopefully it could be anywhere in the overlay district.
So,
Right, it could be, but I mean,
But we know we have a live one for that RC.
right, and because there's other language
might.
here that would assume that it's there, it makes here and obs or would make it difficult. But so, do we need to say anything about that?
Yeah, you could be, no, say anything, but so if we got a project in the, RC, it would apply because we say underline, all the other rules still apply.
But they're.
I don't know that that'd be
but if it's
much of a burden,
if we to have proof of employment. So the problem with the 3 unrelated is that's how we addressed the neighborhoods that are close to the university, where we don't have the control of doing that because you've got
Private homes.
private homes and what we already have today. Whereas now we've got new developments coming in that we can put controls on, that you can't put controls in from the past. Thing we have to smather, all over new things because we have alternate controls that nobody felt you could have in the past, would be the way I would put it.
And that
So
are
would you
difficult to
be
have.
silent about it or say it doesn't apply in this?
I would say it doesn't apply because compensating controls.
Yeah.
So you don't need it because you have other controls that are addressing the root problem.
Yeah, so
in the
that may
intent.
have a benefit of somebody who would be an RC, this project, they might want to have 4 people. And maybe we get some credit for, for doing
Yeah,
this.
you're gonna
And
have,
I'm not sold that the 3 unrelated actually made things better in the neighborhoods anyway,
Agreed.
because I still see plenty of houses being sold and being used as student housing. And if anything, if you do the math, you could easily argue that limiting them to 3 instead of allowing 6 means you have twice as many houses in the neighborhoods going to students.
Well, either
Well, so
way.
if you think, we could say, I would probably just put line the
Did
overlay
we skip over a
project.
bunch of, I'm trying to figure out how we got there. Didn't we just finish D?
We digressed horribly.
Yeah, so
Okay.
do you want to include that or be silent on it?
Included.
I would include
All
it.
right, so I'll
what?
probably put it in under L.
Include that it's explicitly not.
Correct.
In play there.
Right, the overlay district overrides the 3 unrelated.
I agree with you on your assessment of the 3 unrelated. I've never quite got my head around
The
that.
tool to address the house that may be an issue. All right? If you got 6 people living in a home and they keep it within the home and there's no issues, there's no problems.
Yeah.
But if you have a home with 3 people, that's an animal house, that's the way that we address it.
but if it's only 3 people,
And-
it's 3 unrelated.
Well,
4 people,
Yeah.
3 unrelated.
And our code enforcement officer, this is one of her biggest headaches, is trying to enforce that.
She has to look at how many cars are parked
It is,
there. and-
But you know what, there's
enforcement
plenty
is
in
not
the
fast
neighborhood that
or
have 4
easy.
cars in the parking lot and they never get hit because they're quiet. And they mow their lawn and everything's hunky-dory. They don't
It's
have
being
trash
quiet.
everywhere and
Yeah.
nobody knows about it, or the people that know like the people moving in.
So in this
It's
site, you have
responsible
enough oversight, you got enough rental, you got a property manager. I think we should just not worry about it here. The problem will
Yes.
develop later, and the property manager can deal with it. 4 seminary students living next to you, and nobody's going to enforce it on them. That's the reality,
470, you never know.
if there was a seminary here.
But for that, so you are going to
Yeah.
explicitly call it out. and
Can we-
say that it's
Anything
not in
under this
play.
overlay district, it
We're
doesn't
gonna,
apply.
we're gonna need to be prepared to explain that to the public as to how it's going to be compensated for, because there are people that are gonna freak out.
It is a remnant of maybe potentially a slightly different time when structures
Well,
were,
we still have
you know-
slumlords.
But
We definitely have student slumlords in this town
We
still.
definitely do.
Oh, no, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. I'm
But
saying.
that's what they are.
You have family structures where you have more than 3 unrelated people.
Those aren't the that were necessarily the problem.
Yeah, in
But
the past, yeah.
However, we do have working proof of how the 3 unrelated does not need to apply to facilities, large complexes, because Madbury Commons, Orion, all of those are exempt from it anyways, aren't they? And they are perfectly well controlled.
No, it's subject to them there, but you'd
No,
wonder why we need that in
9/11,
Madbury Commons.
9/11, they're not
No,
subject.
No, they are. They're subject to the 3 unrelated. You wonder why there anyone outside.
In the PO?
Yeah. It's, the 3 unrelated applies everywhere except the 4 research industry zones.
Then all the frats are in violation.
Well, those are not dwelling units, but it
Okay.
applies to all the student housing, Madbury Commons. and-
Anyway.
Anyway,
Thank you. Let's go to
you'll
E.
come back to that sometime.
One of our first areas where we have a lot more dials that we should be multiple settings.
All right, so
How
we're
do
on
you word
E.
it?
E.
So
Well,
first,
you
I
got
was
a memo from John, I forwarded this from John Randolph, and he says, "I would strongly push for the number to be higher than 65%. I would at least look for 75%. I agree.
All right, I don't, Tom, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say that maybe first in this section, we have kind of a mechanical issue, which is if we've eliminated the workforce housing definition, we have to figure out 65% of what,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah, that would be,
Well,
where we reference it to like F is rent levels. So,
Okay.
so this becomes, so maybe we need to should we bring rent levels first?
yeah, probably.
All right, so we'll run on the assumption we're going to be bringing rent levels up so that we understand we're talking about a housing unit and fair market rents. So, and in this, that's X% of the dwelling units included, or any workforce housing should be established at fair market rent values, not as workforce rent values.
Well, so we're saying at least X% in a workforce housing development must be workforce housing units.
Yes. Now,
So a
I
workforce.
would
yeah.
suggest that we think of this section as being one of the ones where we have a 65%, 80% is a second density, and 100% is a third density.
Yeah.
That might be a good idea.
Yeah, I think-
All right.
I think it would,
I do not have any suggestions yet as to what those density levels should be. We can decide whether we
We
want
have
to.
3 levels, and I think one should be 100%. So if one is 100%, it could be 180, 60, 100.
well, what's,
What should those 3 levels be, the 2 other levels?
Can
It
I
could be
just-
65, 75,
Can I just ask a
100.
question, just on the rent level, just before we get to that? The rent level using that HUD fair market, is that the same measurement that Dover's using, that
That's what
Ryan-
Dover's
That's what
using.
And that
Dover-
seemed like a very simple mechanism.
Yeah.
It fluctuates based on market. It's not a difficult calculation. You say that once and it covers basically everything.
And
So
we have a chart.
Well, actually, we're being a little more complicated than Dover, because Dover is simply saying 100% of AMI as a fair market rent value. And we, I believe, are going to be looking at the 60, 80, 100% different thresholds, again, as
Well,
potential.
maybe if it's for sale, maybe on units
no,
for
stick
sale.
with rent, stick with
No,
rent.
rent is the HUD fair market
I
is
know,
based
but
on the number of
we're going to be
bedrooms.
using 60%
No,
of.
no,
No,
we-
let me finish my sentence. 60% of HUD fair rent.
So,
No,
no.
it's the HUD fair rent level.
So, again, think of it as a threshold thing. First off, let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Do people
Okay.
understand the difference between 40%, 60%, 80%, and 100% of AMI with regards to
I'm
HUD
not
fair market
confident I
rents?
do.
All right.
Yeah.
So 100% AMI is your average, right? If you look at it from a perspective of who that represents, think of it as somebody who's probably just approaching the prime of their career. Okay? In this household making $135,000.
Okay.
Okay? The
Median.
80% level is, is that what low
Say
income?
100 for easy math.
Excuse me?
Yeah, say it's a.
80%, like 80% to 100.
Yeah, so 40%, is it 40% or 60%? It's very low. As you get lower, there are different places, different triggers that I'll start allowing you to get low-income housing value or whoever, right? And if people are offering rents at that level, then they get bonuses, right? They get priorities and things like that. So as we move down, like the 60%, or so you move from being the median to hitting an area that triggers as low to hitting a area that triggers as very low.
Okay.
All right, and then below that is like, oh, I'm poverty level.
Okay.
Okay. So there are different HUD market numbers for these different levels.
Okay.
And one of the things that we could be looking at, we still have to decide, is whether or not we want to be asking for things that are below the 100% level and trying to get them in there specifically. Because those are the things, because if everything comes in at 100% of fair market rent value, that's not helping the people at the
No,
lower
but
end.
it's
That's
not.
$2,500 a month.
This would be set, we've talked about this.
So-
It would, all of the rents will be set, they really must be set at HUD fair market rent, which is less than the median, but it's not low income. And it's based on the number of bedrooms in the unit. That's what Dover does. That's what with New Hampshire Housing, Sarah Reitzman and George Regan and Ryan Pope and Nick Taylor of Workforce, everybody was very clear. Rental, just use the HUD fair market rent. That's what Dover does. That's what we need to do. So now, in terms of units for sale, that's a different discussion.
So, Michael,
And I'm just saying, before I was cut off, I'm sorry, but if we want to, we need to consider whether or not we want to make that a density incentive, because that would be the way to do it. If we wanted to, if somebody came in at a lower level than the 100, you've been shutting it down, saying we shouldn't even talk about it. I think,
What is, even if you go to 60% AMI, all that says is rent that's affordable. It doesn't give you a rent, well, it maybe gives you a rent, it doesn't tie that to number of bedrooms, household size.
But-
They're very unworkable numbers for rent. If they're for sale, at least you know, okay, 80% for sale is $350,000.
No,
regardless of size.
Tom was trying to say something.
You want to go first?
I have a question. I'm still trying to understand. So in the workforce housing definition that we started with and got rid of, and I thought we've been consistently talking about this in all these discussions, we have a reference for rental, which is affordable to a household no more than 60% of the area median income for a three-person household. Are you suggesting that we?
Okay, this is where I come in.
Disagree, go ahead.
I disagree.
Because I thought what we had talked about when Dover guy, Brian,
Ryan told me.
and maybe that's where I heard it, it's 60% average. So you'll have some people in there at 100%, you may have some
Yeah.
in there at 40%, somehow or other it averages to 60%. That's why 60% in my mind is stuck, because it's an average.
Well, they
So some
use the
people would
HUD
be
fair
this.
market rent to, and Ryan, when I met with them, I said, well, how does the HUD fair market rent relate to the AMI? They said, it's not like 80%, I didn't understand.
It's an average.
Dover.
Yeah, but he charges some people more and others less.
Well, based on bedroom size.
so it really, what kind of model we want to use? Do we want to use a model where we use a model that's a little more lenient, like you were
Yeah,
talking about in Epping, where, we're looking for an average, and so that the developer ends up figuring out what their balance is, and we just let them go, so we don't have to worry about
Just
trying
say
to
it's a
figure out.
target level.
And-
It's not perfect, but 60%, it gives you some higher and some are lower.
Then
Well-
it doesn't tell you by bedroom, it's a useless figure.
Well,
Why does
It's
it matter?
useless.
But Michael, in the state, when these developers are going for grants and LIHTC, all that, when they're going for these grants and special rates that they're getting, they are given these percentages. You must have this amount. Those grants come with guidelines that they have to meet, and that's where that income averaging that you were talking about as well, that Ryan was really referring to, comes in, where it says you have to have a 60%, and so that's how they're able to kind of charge more here, charge less here, they're able to get to that. And that's what they're doing at the rental and the lease levels.
Well, set it at HUD fair market rent, and if someone uses the low-income housing tax credit,
They're gonna
and that
use
has
it.
other standards, then they
Then
have to
they're gonna
follow
do it,
those.
yeah.
Which are probably going to be lower than HUD fair market rent.
Yes, they will be.
So if we say the max slightly lower, they
They're gonna do.
meet both.
They're gonna go, yeah, they're gonna do what those numbers say they have to do.
But I think, but us setting it at HUD fair market is not going to get in the way of that.
So
Are we
I had
talking
a-
about E or
I had a
F?
conversation with Ryan
Talk
today.
about
We went to F.
F.
We're
Skipped-
jumped to F on rent levels, because I had because I think initially it was this sort of complicated formula of AMIs and all of this, and it was rather complicated and rather a lot of rent levels and all this. And then after seeing the presentation from Ryan, they keep it very simple. It's HUD fair market rent, and there's a rent level in our area, Portsmouth to Rochester or Somersworth, that says a one bedroom is this, a two bedroom is this, a three bedroom is this, and it's very simple. And once a year, he can come down and he can look at those leases and he can say, is the rent on these, if you have 100%, are they all at this rent level? It's very easy oversight, and it's very easy calculation. And then it would seem HUD fair market rent, then you get a density bonus. And if you're only going to do 70, so you could get additional density bonuses, the higher percentage that you would want to deploy at target at that rent level. We were getting all these AMIs and charts, and that was rather complicated.
Very confusing.
So I feel that, at least I don't fully understand what HUD is providing. I find it, I would be surprised if HUD isn't providing different levels for, and if it is, where is that?
It's, the HUD fair market rents for our 0 to 6 bedrooms, 0 is a studio. They give you the HUD fair market rent, that's the maximum. And these are.
That's the HUD, right, that's the HUD.
Well, I
what
Get another
it's
page
actually
for
not.
other percentages.
Right. And so why can't we be using that other page? I'm confused at how we have slipped into a conclusion. The only thing out there that we have data for, and thus that is workable, is the 100% level.
No, it's the HUD fair market rents, which is not
is-
exactly, it's less than 100%. but they could not explain it, it was too complicated.
Well,
They
yeah,
said,
it's
just
not
use
that
this.
complicated.
Tell you what,
It can't be
at the
too
next
complicated.
meeting,
Well, at least
I'll
it's-
bring my laptop and I'll go into the HUD site.
I think we need
for
that.
everybody.
I'm
I think we
looking at,
need
they
to
have,
understand that.
I'm on the HUD site now, and the amount of data sets that they have in there is immense. And,
Which is why.
So we need to pick the one that
Well, that's why
works
the
for us.
professionals
Can you
said
pass
to me,
that sheet on?
use the HUD fair market rents. These are the professionals, housing people at the state office.
New Hampshire Housing.
This is Ryan Pope, who's a banker, the housing navigator, very experienced, and Nick Taylor.
Could you pass
This is, it's very simple. It's
I-
very
and
I
simple.
don't
There it
disagree
is.
that there is a simple solution. I'm not sure I'm not convinced that's the solution for us, and I feel that we need to understand the opposite conclusion.
We may want to look at some different options.
And I think that, my sense is that sort of pivoted after the discussion with Ryan. There was sort of a simplification of the way that we could look at the rent structure. And there also says another benefit there is, I think, when vouchers are tagging them.
The issue that I think we need to have, maybe some of us need to just like have a conversation one-on-one with some people to understand better how it works. Because when I'm looking at that.
So is that high or low?
That's high. If you're talking about affordable, it's lower, mind you, its market rent is about $2,500 to $29,000 depending upon the apartment, but lower rents can be found too.
I think-
Well, but they use in Dover, that's what the assumption is.
Yeah, keep in mind that Dover's model is different from ours. Because first off, they sell to throw it into their conservation fund to buy land. That's not something we're going to be doing. So we can't, just saying that's the way Dover does it, on the one side, when their whole mechanism for providing density is going to be different than ours, doesn't play well.
If you can find
Next.
another chart that gives
I can-
rents by bedroom size, that makes
as-
more sense than this?
As Mr. Kelly just said, there are dozens of them on that
Do you
website.
see them that are geared to bedroom size?
But why, I mean, I'm sure why
But-
we're worried about the business side, but the only thing about HUD is that it is a commonly used process, and you really don't want to reinvent the wheel. Remember, we've been throwing around these spreadsheets that come out on an annual basis, it's clear, it's done, that we were trying to tweak that by bedroom unit, why we even have to have that in there, when we've already in the housing unit said that they have to have 50% of them as studio and one bedrooms.
Well, that's a different
That's
thing.
another matter.
That's
But
different.
it's not if you're tying it to that HUD value and the bedroom sizes, because you've just defined bedroom sizes in E, and then you're talking about in the rent
Well,
levels.
when we get to-
that it's there.
And the purpose for that, and I'll get to you in a moment, Richard, the 4 bedrooms,
No, I don't disagree with the housing units, what I'm saying, bedrooms in the rent level section. And we've defined it up here, so I don't know why we're arguing about the cost of the units being HUD numbers and having this note in here on rent levels that literally says that will be set on the number.
Mr. Kelly, what did you find for me?
well, I'll tell you this, let's not forget is using the fair market rents for, and it's not for the town of Durham for affordable housing. So it is kind of square peg, round hole, because they define it, it's used to determine payment standards for the amounts of housing choice voucher program. Initial renewal rents for some expiring projects, Section 8 contracts, initial rents under HAP contracts you get the picture here. I can go on for an entire paragraph, and nowhere do they say, and it's to set affordable housing or affordable rental costs. They don't do that. So to your point, I think we got to learn what this data is telling us and see if it is fair market rent that is the best fit, or whether there's something else.
As long as it's set by bedroom size, rather than 60.
Find a developer to come and build the thing. In the rent level, we're talking about a maximum rent here. So the 1,800 rent, if you want the rent to go lower to attract a different group of people, you have to pull the density lever and just carving up a little different. So I'm very comfortable with saying something like the maximum rent is the HUD level, but then you pull the density lever and say, okay, let's get more people in here. Then you have shared common things, shared utilities, and before you know it, the developer can get more money for 3 units than he could for 2, especially if you start shrinking them a little bit. So the density lever is how you're going to make it more affordable. The reason Durham's not affordable in a lot of places right now is because the density is 1 small house on 3 acres. So we're going for density and we're trying to incentivize the developer to build more units. That's what drives the cost down.
I totally agree with that you are going for density. And then I think you're going for the rent level is consistent through our region that would be defined here. So that rent in Durham would be the same rent in Dover, as I would understand it. Since we're in the same district, essentially, to drive density. And you could say, you get some density bonus if you're going to do 100% at HUD fair market. You get a density bonus if you're going to do 75%. You get a different density bonus if you're going to get 50%. And then in Dover, they're doing that transfer where they're saying, okay, we'll give you a lot of density and you don't have to pay for that density. You don't have to contribute to the conservation committee. We'll just give you the density and basically it's a free addition if you're going to commit to that.
We're not. So if we had.
Tom was next.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
That's right. I would say that we have already, our starting point is giving a lot of density. Pricing for the density that we're already talking about giving is a maximum rent of 100% of HUD fair market value, or whether it's something less than that, right? Or
I agree.
was that the density?
Yeah. So I don't know what HUD fair market rents are equivalent to in AMI, partly because it's apples and oranges. Fair market rents is set by bedroom size. AMI for rent does not deal with that. So I don't find those numbers useful at all. But what I was explained to me is that fair market make this very clear that we have been operating from the beginning of this ordinance with the idea that with a certain kind of project, a certain kind of developer, and we have a model for one, the John Randolph, mayor, and talking to Dover, that with a certain structure of this, we can get a project that is dense and potentially 100% workforce or affordable. If we want it to be a little bit less, maybe it's less. However, if we are looking at a different number than fair market rents, something lower than this, then it's a totally different structure. No longer looking at a project which is 70, 80, 90, 100%. We are then looking at a project which is more conventionally 80% market, maybe 20% using density. It's a totally different model. And if we're going to move in that direction, then it's a totally different
We're going to move
structure.
on. Sally, you can have the last word. And we're going to move on and leave this as unresolved.
Yeah, it is unwritten. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we look at the fair market rents and then as incentives allow, and you're going to get this added bonus if you go 80% of fair market rents. You're going to get this added bonus if you do 60%. So you look at our what we're looking at, but if you want to build some more density and then build this and we'll give you this more density. So if we use that we need some more conversation with some people that know more about this, educational wise.
Would it be useful?
I think let's tap our internal resources first. Some of the people on the board here can dig into it and bring something back for further discussion.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on to G.
Don't make eye contact.
So did we skip?
No, but so we have E still.
No, we're going to, those two seem to be tied too interchangeably. So I'm going to skip, unless people think we can talk about E when we don't know what F is.
I don't have a problem raising it higher, because I think that, I don't have a problem raising it.
Well, but then if we're going to
70.
have incentives and tiers, then,
Yeah,
I mean, we have the idea of, we seem to like the idea of 3 different percentage tiers in terms of how much is on that.
yeah. That's not bad.
Yeah,
idea.
so-
Is that on a rent level, or is that on a density, you get a density bonus? Like, I think the
I
rent
think-
level of just keeping it fair market rent just consistently
No, that's the
simplifies.
percentage of units that are being rented
At that.
Affordable.
at that
Affordable
level.
at the affordable level,
Yeah.
at the fair market level.
but then Sally also mentioned
And-
doing it based on, if you have lower than fair market rent, you get a density. You could
That's
do
where our
one,
density,
either or
our
both.
density
So-
incentives could come out of that.
And that was the one that I thought you were saying, I don't have any numbers to be able to do that. So let's not go back into that one. This one here was the idea of 100% of the development is at affordable levels, or a medium level or a low level, and what those levels should be, and what kind of incentives we have for those at those different levels. And I mentioned earlier that, so we mentioned the Churchill density levels. What I don't know is whether the Churchill density levels should be the 100% or market data.
Yes.
And construction data. So that's why I was saying, let's move on to G.
I
So what are the
agree.
Churchill
E&F
density
type.
levels?
5,200 feet.
Or, wait, wait.
Or is it 5,000?
We've got, let's see, density is K. So, Churchill. Oh, okay, I said Churchill.
Churchill, 5,000.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah.
your minimum lot size, 5,000 square feet, minimum lot area per dwelling unit, which is the key number we're talking about,
Oh,
4,200 feet.
Yeah, so Churchill seemed, those numbers just, there's not magic, but they seemed the best ones looking at the dimensional table.
So, and part of the information that I wanted, so is Dover has a couple of new developments that just went in, that are I think they were 100% workforce housing.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know what that number is that they developed under. What are the size of those units, so that we, so that we can figure it out.
Is 1582?
I wonder if we could.
Yes, so what was this number here
Oh, well, that's,
would need to go to Dover for and find out from their zone?
So Paul, let me ask a question. So the Churchill numbers you're talking about? are
Yes.
What, 4,200?
40, minimum lot area per dwelling unit, 4,200 square feet
And the lot area is
For
5.
land.
of
Of
land. So
land,
you would
fine.
need 4,200 square feet of land in the overall lot
To put one unit.
to put one unit.
which is very dense for a big
no.
lot.
It's point-
Average California lot is. less
0.1
than-
acre.
No, but I mean, if you
0.1.
have, say, a
One,
50 or
0.11.
75 or 100 acre lot, that's a lot of units. We're also saying the density is you subtract wetlands and you subtract open water, and then you divide by the 4,200.
But when you're talking multi-unit buildings, like say an 8,
10
That are
in that case. 1 acre, but gets you 10 units.
1 acre gets you,
And that doesn't sound like a lot now, does it?
that's reasonable.
Oh, but if you have 100 acres.
think it is?
If you have 100
Well, if on an
acres.
stop
acre,
thinking about 100 acres.
I'm
What if you
thinking
only
of-
have
I'm
2
thinking
acres?
of-
But then you
because
multiply
I'm
it.
thinking of the real parcels out there.
He had 7
50
acres and he
100
did
acres,
44.
A lot of them.
And your maximum impervious surface ratio, I don't know if that is 80%. Because that's the other number that has
Yeah,
to come
that's-
into play, because it means you don't get to use your full acre. You only get to use, by the time you put in sidewalks and other
parking,
things,
yeah.
you're only using
Well,
60%?
Yeah, that's only.
40,000
the-
square feet in an acre.
The way.
so you're down to six-
Subject to change, under K, is using Churchill as a basis, which is 4,200 square feet of area per unit. But first you subtract the wetlands and you subtract areas of open water. So say you have a 50 acre parcel. 10% of that is wetlands. Then you've got 45 acres times 10, that's 450 units. That's a lot. But that's why we have this circuit breaker. 200 maximum. To go over 200, you need a conditional use.
And that's fine. You know,
When I look at this diagram here, I see a lot of smaller lots that are going to be in the overlay district. I see
There's
5-acre lots and 15-acre lots.
Yeah, and you're
Yeah, but
also
it's-
saying that this could have a community center in it and a lot of other things. So you're saying, oh, you know, if all you did was pack a bunch of this other stuff in, but you're not talking, you're right, you're not talking about the walking trail that you're asking for and the connectivity. I just don't, I think you're right, we just need to fact find what is the true person's space going to be in these units? What are these units going to be? Because you can't, and then don't sit there and say it has to have a 5,000 lot area. And then we've also said that we're only going to go 30 high. Is that 2 stories?
Yeah, 2.5 or.
It's not, why not, yeah, why wouldn't we be going to 3 stories? Because right
3
now, it's
stories.
not 3 stories.
Yeah, you'll never,
So that we copied off Churchill was a surprise to me, because when I started looking at the data, I started going, wow. I mean,
Well,
this, you could
it
put a
can be whatever you
single-family
want
home
it to
on
be.
this,
That was just seemed
basically.
like a good model, but.
and keep in mind that when we talk about height and stuff, we're also looking, we're asking for a diverse
Yeah.
type of look as well to the units. So you could have 3 stories, you could have 2 stories. A mix of 2 stories and 3 stories is going to be more appealing to the eye than so by allowing 3 stories, it keeps everything from being like a mod
Well,
uniform.
35 feet gives you 3 stories, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would
Oh,
be
well, that would have, but if you go to 35 by conditional use, but.
And
But
why
you can't, so that's what I'm saying, is you can't use those numbers.
well, tweak from one of the others.
Yeah, you
I
could do
think
that.
I think it would be a good idea if we could almost do a bit of a field trip here and there around the areas of people that housing that has been built, dense housing that has been built. For instance, on that thing in Exeter the other day that we're at, it's walkable to the downtown, so we walked there, and there's a new neighborhood that they created. It's a street, and it's in the middle of a bunch of older 1955s, post-war World II ranches, 3 beds, 1 bath. And in this one area, there was a piece of vacant land, and somebody bought it, and they invested in. They're not necessarily affordable, but they're affordable-ish, you know what I mean? They're still like in the
Exeter's
600s, but it's a very dense neighborhood, and it's almost like if you were in the faculty neighborhood when you have a house right next to a house. You have small lots, tiny lots, like tiny lots, but they're not buying it for the lot, they're buying it for the house, and they like the accessibility of the fact that they don't have a care of much. But to start to say, we got to have reality as to what things look like and the amount of space they take. There's also the large garden-style apartments that are the most reasonably priced to build and go up in the quickest. And that's the best we should be trying to strive for that.
You said, I mean, it's 30 feet.
But we should look at the dimensions of what a 10 unit looks like and what an 8 unit looks like. And the reality of
It
that.
could be, like you said, you could have some smaller homes, because you're putting a lot of variety, it seems to me that
different things in.
that all of our zones seem to have this cookie cutter designation, which means all you're really building is this. And that's why,
I'd be inclined to provide the developer with as much creativity and with as many
Exactly.
options as possible
Yeah.
and as few constraints as we would think
Yeah.
necessary. So, to the height, 3 stories seems reasonable to me.
I'd
Well, yeah, the elevator, you're gonna have
I'd
to-
prefer a limit that says 3 stories as opposed to a certain number of feet.
Too much higher than 3 stories, you're probably going to need to get into an elevator, and which brings up costs too.
But then the developer can be creative. I think
They can figure it out.
pushing it down to the person that's going to be like in the middle of this and trying to map it all out, I think we want to provide them as much flexibility.
I think there's some places that we can look, like if you look at the property on Route 4, that land pitches, you could have a 3-story front and a 4-story back easily.
Yeah, no one would know the difference.
And no one would notice, and your height in the back would be big, but it's facing away. It doesn't need the same buffer because it's not as giant.
Like Riverwoods?
And so I think there's ways you could figure that out. 700 square feet, everything in Berwick has rented at that size, 700 to 1,000, they're all gone very quickly. And their rents are around $1,800. And those buildings aren't that close together.
And
So-
what kind of buildings are they?
So these are attractive 12 units, 3 stories high, 3,000 square feet on the first floor. For a foot, easily replicate that type
And
of
just
thing.
stack up on top of each other.
No, I think it's 4.
I think they're at 50 feet.
Is that 5 stories?
Yeah, I think
Close,
so.
yeah.
We're in a pitch.
They also ended up on top of a hill, which
That's
Yeah.
the real
aggravates
issue.
it.
Is good.
Agreed.
And then let them figure it out.
Agreed.
Yeah,
That's
you
why-
can say just a limit of 3 stories and not a.
Encourage diversity of how.
Hear about the 100, the 1-bedroom, the 50% and all that.
Yeah.
I think I can sell 100 1-bedrooms.
I agree with
pretty
it.
limited.
I agree that 2 bedrooms are a nice standard for an apartment, because if you need a roommate, you can have a roommate. If you have a child, you can bring that in. And 1 bedrooms or some studios. But I think that we should be allowing more 2 bedrooms just because of the flexibility of a 2 bedroom. I mean,
Yeah.
a family of 4 can live in a 2 bedroom. You put your kids in 1 bedroom and the parents in the other. A single mom is easier, to have that. You have a young professional has a roommate, and you have a 2 bedroom, you have a 2 bath. Even a 1 bath can be done, or 1.5 bath, 1 3/4. I don't know why. I'm assuming that our preference for 1 bedroom is coming out of we don't want children there.
Right.
And I think that we already know very few children come out of these units. And when I just think we just need to get past that.
Should
Well,
we?
the board talked about, I think there was a sense, not to have a lot of 4 bedrooms. We're debating.
those would be houses.
You were debating what the limitation should be on the numbers of bedrooms, studio 1, 2, 3. That's too limiting.
I think 2-bedroom apartments, we're making these things without understanding what the market needs. And 2 bedrooms there is actually a great need for 3 bedrooms, but 2 bedrooms are that nice, comfortable middle
Well,
place.
how would you like to define it? Because there's a real concern about 4 bedrooms, number of.
Well, I don't
goes
think we
way
need
up.
to, we're not working about 4
With not
bedrooms.
having, originally we said no more than 1/3 3 bedrooms.
You know where Virginia Beach, Virginia, when we were living down there, 'cause my husband was
Well,
in the
that's 'cause
Navy,
that's what-
and they were being sold to Navy to members of the Navy who had families. They needed 4-bedroom apartments, they needed 3-bedroom apartments, there were even 6-bedroom apartments. We don't need those.
I'm okay with being more flexible on the studio and 1-bedroom as long as we drop, as we discussed, the 3 unrelated person
Yeah.
rule. If for some reason that fails, I would want to go back and revisit.
Well, so
My
assuming
thing-
we
think we
drop
should
the
do
3
bedrooms.
unrelated, what limits would you want on, it's really limited,
Do you want
3
just-
and 4 bedrooms?
Do you just want to strike that
Doing 4
sentence?
Well, I think you need some
Where are we
limit
now?
on
You guys are
3 and
back to
4
something
bedrooms.
else.
You
You're
need to
hopping
define-
again.
We're talking about the
Second paragraph.
The bedroom mix.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle of E.
Yeah, so what do you want to do with that? I think you really think you should,
And we were going back and forth, and
Ones
then there
and
was sort of
twos.
an arbitrary decision where we said, okay, let's have 50% of them have to be studio or 1-bedroom to sort of contain it.
I think
and
that
let
is
them-
arbitrary.
It was sort of,
It
it was
was.
arbitrary, and it
It
wasn't
was a
anyone
sway.
like really,
No, it
having
was
to
a-
force think it, and their money's on the line on that.
Okay, my comment is amongst the dimensions and the housing sizes, 1, 2, 3, max 3, is why isn't this almost shaped more like a planned unit development? Let the guy figure it all out and put it in the footprint. And that's why I think that we're just really struggling here with,
I think that's because of cost, and I think we're asking, I think we're putting numbers to something that we have no idea what it's going to cost construction-wise and the effort to put in and what the market will bear, you know.
But that's, like I said, they know that. Why are we writing it
They know
here?
that. They know what it is, so let's give them the flexibility to,
Well, but-
they're gonna build, Michael, I don't think we need to be afraid of anybody building a 4-bedroom apartment, okay? They're
No,
not gonna
I
build-
actually am in my,
So if they're
my
not going
years
to
of
build it,
renting.
then I think people would be more comfortable. The school thing was a big deal. Then bedrooms and no more than
And a
whatever.
developer's gonna go, fine, I wasn't gonna build 4-bedroom anyway, so
Right,
if you
so who
wanna put
cares?
that,
Yeah,
put it.
put it in.
Well, why not no 4-bedroom and maximum X% 3-bedrooms?
No.
But why-
put percentage?
33,
Why
40%?
percentage of this kind, and a developer's gonna come back and say, I can't make the numbers work doing that.
If you.
So why
if-
don't we let him decide what the numbers will work and the market will bear? Because that developer, I shouldn't say he, that
know.
developer,
Them,
they
She,
Whatever.
will build what the market will bear because
Still have to
care.
earn a living to pay
But
their
they
rent.
have to earn a living, and you know what? And you know who's making them earn that
Right on
living
the
is the
Mercedes.
bank. They're not gonna get, it's gonna get built if the financing doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm in favor of just capping the 4-bedroom, say no 4-bedrooms.
No 4
And
bedrooms.
leaving the rest of it to unrelated.
Maybe
So,
we don't
okay.
even need E. Maybe we just use the fact that we've got the housing types in there, that we're describing the vision of having multiple types of stuff in I, and not even have E except for banning the 4-bedroom.
Need to say the number, the percentage of
Well,
units
he's trying to do
to
3 different
qualify.
things.
Who has to have the numbers to qualify?
yeah.
At least have a certain percentage of units at that, whatever the F rate is specified. That's like the critical one.
At least
to
the
me.
first paragraph of E is important.
Yeah.
Right.
The other two are off.
Delete 4-bedroom and then see if you want any limit on 3-bedroom.
Yeah, just delete the
That's
4-bedroom.
fine with me.
Just get rid of it. They're never
And
gonna
just
build it
leave it to the
anyway.
developer's
Nobody builds
discretion to
4-bedrooms.
decide how they want to structure that, how they
Yeah.
want to organize the style of the
So
buildings.
you wouldn't put any limit on 3-bedrooms?
No.
No, let them,
Limit that,
Right,
and
if people want to live together in 3-bedrooms, great.
and they're not gonna build a lot of 3-bedrooms because it's cheaper to build, you know, the other
I
ones.
don't know about that.
But Michael, we are in need of 3-bedrooms because believe it or not, there are families out there that need 3-bedrooms.
But a lot of them will go with 2.
Okay.
because
All right,
that's-
They will squeeze into
No,
2.
no 4-bedrooms
They'll
and
put in
then
a
just
bunk
leave
there.
it at
Yep,
that.
yep.
And no 3 unrelated doesn't apply.
that,
We should go back to
that model
Dover, 'cause
that was
there's a couple of those
produced that,
apartments they've done. I bet you
I
they'll
guess
get any
Mr.
please.
Lawson produced,
The
describing
describing the number.
the
We don't-
additional
yeah.
net new, school
Oh, of school
participants.
kids, yeah.
It was
yeah.
still
Was
like,
pretty enlightening, and that, I don't think you're
Small
gonna,
amount,
it's a
very
very small
minimal.
amount. I think we're actually sort of losing in terms of that, so I think that is a nice
All right, no
compromise there.
4-bedrooms.
Yeah.
And
so I'm,
you-
because the housing units is more related to the amount of workforce housing that's in there, and it's just mixed that with the amount. I see it now,
Correct.
never mind.
Yeah.
Okay. I was getting, the main target of housing units was getting lost to me because of this second paragraph. So we're just taking out the second paragraph.
We're losing among the
Correct.
workforce.
Yes.
And,
No,
and that
50%.
third paragraph,
That third paragraph we haven't talked about
yeah.
yet.
And are we changing the number in the first paragraph from 65 to 75?
Yeah, coming back
80?
to it.
We're going to come back on that
Why don't
one.
we just
back.
go
Let's
60?
do that.
Yeah, it's
And move on.
tied to,
Just go
Yeah.
65 through.
I want to come back on that one because I think we should have,
Back to it.
we should allow a couple of options for that
I
one,
think
I
so.
think.
35% of total dwelling units may be available for sale.
So this becomes one where, let me dig up the numbers so that we can actually look at the numbers of what a for sale unit looks like
It's going to cost.
and then ensure that we do it in perpetuity and all. We can talk about that. Let's do it after we have a better understanding of the HUD numbers.
Yeah, and I think we need to understand that,
Can we jump down to G now?
yeah, let's do that. I feel like
All
I'm
right, so this is a touchy one. Because not everybody gets all of their rental income. I mean, we're talking about vouchers now, right? If there's somebody's
That's
coming in with a
Section 8.
voucher, they're not getting the income from employment to cover the rent.
they're getting some money from
All
somewhere
right, you might
else.
have people on disability or social security who are trying to get into these units and who should be able to get into these
Agreed.
units.
Vouchers cover the
So-
gap between what they can actually afford and what is
So
cost.
this income, I mean, we need to do something different about
Some specificity, other types of income that would be added to employment income.
Disability, VA benefits.
Right.
Social Security.
Right,
all
but
that.
just other personal income, I think, is too broad and gets us back into the problem of this potentially just becoming a senior housing
Or
development.
leave it there and then say, however many that was.
The reason that we have that language is to essentially
It's the
prevent
student
student
thing.
housing.
Correct.
Well, students, full-time students who are not working.
That-
And senior.
I don't,
He's concerned about the seniors.
I don't recall this. I recall the student piece
So we're-
on the guarantor.
Some members of the board are considered are concerned that this just becomes senior housing only.
And
I
that
think
does
that
happen.
Or primarily, or
Or
eats, so it's just-
primarily.
it
I
eats
mean,
into the
I think
goal
we should
of
have-
workforce.
It does happen.
I would, if my seniors are working 20 hours a week at Market Basket,
They're,
then maybe we should have let them, right? So maybe having, rather than look at the amount of income you get from your sources, we could look at that, but also say, well, look, if you're working on average of X number of hours a week,
I
that
think
qualifies
that
you
works
as
too.
well.
That's where I had started out, and
That they're working.
this cover the rent concept was suggested as a alternative.
That-
But yes, I agree with that.
there will be no guarantors on allowed. Though I do get your point on the turning into very nice, basically turning into retired assisted living or retired. Because in Exeter,
Pre-assisted
if you
living.
look at them, I keep saying Exeter, but the Mills, because I have a friend that lives there, they're all old people.
Yeah.
And you want to get on the list, you got to have somebody that lives there and knows that somebody's moved out foot first.
Yeah. If
Wow.
we're talking
Or
about
you can't
leaving it
get
to
in.
market, that's, in
All
my
old
mind,
people,
clearly we're
they're
market
in,
drivers.
they're not moving.
Well, how would you change the language in G then?
As Paul suggested,
No
we could
guarantors.
do it by the
So
minimum.
we could,
It's hard to enforce.
I mean,
I'm concerned about fair housing. Are they going to come at us and, that is not how, and you
I
can,
mean, no guarantors we can definitely do.
that will eliminate a
expect.
lot, that will eliminate most undergraduate
And
students that are not working.
But
All of them.
But it doesn't
not-
address the
Or
senior,
maybe
it doesn't
sufficient,
address the
like
senior
the
issue.
tenants must be able to cover the
No.
rent from employment or personal income, e.g. or i.e., without use of a guarantor on the lease.
If we're trying to
But again,
eliminate,
personal income, what does that mean?
Yeah, but you're still going to keep away some of it. It's still, you're presenting a little bit of a hurdle that is
What's the
is gonna
hurdle
help.
for, what hurdle is that for a retired
Well, if
person?
somebody, if the owner wants to just rent to 3 full-time students, we
I'm not
can
trying to
say-
address
is
housing
not
that's
age
available
restricted,
to
this is not-
workforce.
becomes just
This is just
retirees.
an inexpensive retirement community.
I
I
think
don't
that,
think it would be.
It happens, Michael, it does happen.
I think it totally would be that.
are adding to the supply, so
So-
you're adding to the pool of available housing.
the one thing, if we try to do, absolutely would run afoul of the fair housing laws.
I think we would.
age is, yeah.
Well, I thought we addressed this with the attorney before, and that's how we came back to the
I know
conclusion at our
she's
last
gonna, like,
meeting that we
give me
could
the
do
hairy
this.
eyeball, whatever we come up with, but.
But they do have at least
Do have
one
retirees.
retired couple in there. But so I wonder how people are on his waiting list that are, retired, 65 and older, but he's got a mix in there, and his idea was that employees,
So
or employers, so.
let me throw this
Employee.
question at you. So where are all these people coming from?
They could move into Durham.
The old people?
What do you mean, people who are downsizing, looking
So they're
to
putting
move?
their other place out on the market, which is a secondary way of us, if we're right-sizing people out of
Yeah, but
out of a place
But they're
that's too
putting it
large
on the
for-
market
They're
for
put
no
on the
less than
market for exactly, for
$600,000, double of what?
$1,500.
They-
It's not
that.
addressing.
They probably paid $65,000 for it.
We're arbitraging for the benefit of that person who's going to sell their full-value home in a high-value community and move into what is essentially a subsidized housing project.
And that property is being bought by a rather limited market, right, of workforce individuals. We're not, when they put that house up and it's sold.
Right,
Those buyers
Are
are,
wealthy.
that's the way to put
right,
it.
exactly.
Well, how have, I
So we
guess
haven't
here it goes
accomplished-
reaching again, but somebody must have solved this problem.
You build more housing.
No, no.
No?
Most people don't consider it a problem,
Having old people?
having old people.
They haven't really thought
Not
about it.
having workforce housing?
I don't know. I think that,
It is a
No,
finite
It's
number.
considered an actual, I mean, you look at most of them, and it's actually in the list of people who are, quote, being attracted and who are getting support that they need are the people on, you know, us at the, so here in Durham, we're accustomed to thinking of, yes, yeah, I just flipped a $65,000 house into a $650,000 house, right? Over the course of my lifetime. But there's a lot of people who aren't retiring comfortably, and they need housing like this.
There's a lot of people that have been renting all their lives and need housing.
There are, and they do. Durham has a fairly aged population, and I have understood this effort so far to be to try and create housing that benefits a younger workforce that kind of revitalizes the community. If we structure this in a way that it runs a high risk of simply being inexpensive senior housing, we failed in that effort, giving up a lot of density.
The way we do that isn't by trying to keep the old people out via some sort of,
That's
Well-
probably getting into some of the housing types
I think
too,
that we
then.
would, I don't know what kind of language we could use to minimize over
all right,
retired people on retirement income.
you can't legally.
You can't legally because
You can't legally.
it's restrictive.
So.
It's against the law.
Maybe we need to
It's
review.
age discrimination.
Exactly. Maybe we need to review the categories of people that you're not allowed to discriminate against.
Yes.
One of them is old people.
Age.
Unfortunately.
But not, I don't believe, whether or not people are
Can't
working.
restrict old people. We can't tell old people you're not allowed to move in.
We can tell people that
That
don't
is-
make enough
that
money.
We
is
that
can
they-
law.
tell people that to move in, they have to work. I don't believe that
no,
non-working
we-
people are a restricted class.
We can,
That's probably true.
then you run into all of these things of like, okay, you're no longer working, and now we're going to bounce you out. Your income's no longer
Yeah, we
this,
can't
now
do
you
that.
need to leave.
we can't do that.
You know, you've reached an age where you've aged out, you now need to leave. It becomes very complicated
Just throw
to
the
start, you know.
Well, I think
I think in Dover, they've just
And
kind
it-
of washed their hands of it. It can be different age groups, and there can be different economic groups, and there can be a vibrant new community that's sort of evolves. And, you know, you could have, to Paul's point, you could have a 70-year-old person that's working at Hannaford.
Which would be great.
Just right down the road.
Which would be great.
And so it's very complicated on how you include or exclude people. Maybe, you know, I think the guarantor system seems to sort of like
Students
deal with students.
He's
And then
concerned.
I would leave the rest alone, I think, and just let it, you've added to in other places, so you would think that you would see single-family housing prices decline.
one other comment on.
Or stabilize.
The other thing I think
Or
we have
stabilize.
is that businesses in the area are in contact with the developers because they want their employees to have a place. And so I think maybe the pressure just from the whole business community, because once they know that there's a new development coming in, they're calling, they're saying, you know, that they want to make sure that there's room for transfers coming in and new hires, and they're putting themselves on waiting lists.
Heck, I believe up in Lebanon, the hospital's actually partnering with developers to guarantee that they get X number of spots within a development for their own staff.
Well, so they're doing in Exeter at that new place, 6-hour ashram, they're all getting, the hospital's getting spots.
Yeah, so it actually becomes a way to get your funding better. More
I think Richard
established.
has-
Yeah, hey, Paul, can I throw something
Go
in
ahead.
next here? So, Tom, to your point, my parents live in the POA community out behind and POA stands for Preservation of Affordable Housing. And it's not subsidized, but it would be considered like fair market rents, okay? And there's a lot of old people in there. They're old. They don't work.
Yeah.
Though my father with dementia would sometimes think he's going to work.
Oh, man.
But I think we need to reach out to some of these. I'm going to get on the horn with POA and understand if this is a problem that they have. Because they're also trying to serve young people. There's some with kids in there. But boy, is it ever a small number.
Right.
I know this is in Dover, but there's a elderly couple they can get that's affordable to rent, requires them to go up 6 steps just to get to the front door.
Yeah, I know.
All right. I mean, there's issues, and I mean, it's sort of the trying to keep the elderly out is sort of has the same problem as trying to keep the students out. It's like you got
Except
a
that
portion that
students
you
aren't covered.
need to be able to let in, who have to be let in, who that from a moral and ethical perspective. And yeah, you're going to have some who take advantage of it, who the many because of the few.
And over 55 housing actually is also in short supply. In Durham, we tend to think of over 55 as Riverwoods and, and Brookdale and these higher end, but Baghdad is really,
Baghdad, isn't it?
is Section 8 really, but,
We saw the demographic report from, I don't know which it was exact, from a recent study that quite old.
Yeah, we've
Yes,
got double
we are.
spikes at both ends of the spectrum.
I can't, while it is, well, there are, moral reasons to argue for more affordable senior housing. I can't see that as a priority goal of ours.
No,
we're not.
But it's also, it's not worth trying to go the extra mile to restrict it, is what I'm saying.
If there are, and I'm saying that at least so far, I feel that if there are other priority goals, that it's like.
Well, I will, you can try to write whatever you want, and most likely Laura will shoot it down.
Well,
We'll have to see what we
Let's
can
try.
figure.
I'll try.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer anymore, but I will.
Look into
But you got a little
I will do a little bit
experience,
of research on what I think we can do.
How you can, there can be
All right,
discrimination.
can we move?
Yeah,
Well, Tom,
I-
are you going to look into that?
I will, but
I think part of
it's
it-
just for purposes of proposing something, Laura or whomever, to pass on it. I'm not being a lawyer.
I
All right,
still
so
think that
it-
some of these are, if you look at housing types, there are definitely people that are retiring or are retired that are going to be really wanting a specific type of housing. And if you're having a mix of all kinds of developments, you're going to end up with a mix of people because, yeah, I don't want to walk up, stairs to get to the second story. I'm not going to, and if you had a 3-story apartment building, I'm probably not going to be in there. But I know my
Maybe on
parents
ground
wouldn't go
floor.
there, and they're looking to move into my apartments downstairs. And they're going to find out that 1 bedroom's not going to be enough. They're going to be knocking at, all over the place, and then they're going to want to find them.
That there'd be more than one housing type.
We're jumping ahead.
Yeah,
We're jumping
Get
ahead.
to that, we'll get housing.
Can we move on to H? Income qualification, that's kind of mixed in with G a little bit. Is this also what you're going to kind of look at? I mean, do we need, income qualification, is the way Dover does it good enough? Or do we want, Neil?
Well, so they're hands off.
They don't have
Exactly.
a maximum.
I think
Right.
I think it's a wise move. I think for the town to get into verifying income and forcing that and then having
We
to go
can't.
and look at it, and then somehow, the income falls or the income.
So some of us did
So
before.
we'll review that.
Yep, that's fine.
And come back later.
The-
Now we can talk about housing types. I want to go maybe 10 more minutes and then try to wrap this up.
Sure.
You're thinking Celtics.
No,
No.
Oh, well.
I'm thinking I just don't want to go all the way to 10 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, the evening's wearing on.
All right, so housing types, I believe everybody's in favor of the idea of we want a mixture of housing types in a development.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is
We're not going to have all those types.
I would like to remove the word shall from the first line and convert it to may.
No one's going to pick everything there. Yeah, may.
Because when you say
be-
residential
may-
units,
May be
shall be
developed.
developed as multifamily dwellings, you're saying every single structure's got to be a multifamily dwelling.
I thought Michael's for transfer
Yeah, we're
restriction
defining, which is,
purposes.
and everything but single family is really
Right, and then you've
multifamily,
defined
including
multifamily
tiny
as,
houses.
right.
But I still think may is better than shall.
Well, but the goal, Sally, you said yourself,
The multifamily is
multifamily is
cheaper
where
to
we,
do.
well,
Yeah.
that's our goal, that's where we get numbers. Sorry, multifamily is where we get real numbers and.
Density is easier to build
Which
that
means
way.
that the developers are going to gravitate in that direction anyway.
Would they?
But when we say shall, we're also closing a door.
Well, it doesn't matter, but
Tiny houses aren't
But I
multifamily.
think we could define it if they're on shared lot. I just think we want to not allow or severely limit single-family houses on their own lot. That's not what we're
And
at.
that's, so if the actual definition that's used of multifamily dwelling is anything except for a
Yeah.
single-family house on its own lot, right? Which we had a problem with because of the perpetuity restrictions.
Yeah, so
we
I
don't
mean,
want
we
that.
could just include, i.e. the following, and a mix is encouraged or required.
All right, let me, I'm going to do a development. I'm a little tight on funding. To make the banks happy, I'm only going to do 90% workforce. I need to take 10% of that other 10% and sell it off as non-workforce housing to help pay for the other 90%. And the way I can do that most effectively is with a single-family house. Since it's part of my development,
Yeah.
you're not allowing me to
hear
raise
you.
the money to create the rest of the development that you
Right,
want.
so this ought to apply not to the entire development, but to those units that are being used to qualify for the workforce housing. So back to.
Which it's a lot easier to solve that just by changing one word than to try to write 3 more sentences.
Which is kind of related to the minimum percentage of workforce housing. No more than X percent may be single-family.
Right.
Which is what we said.
Why don't we just say that, no more than X percent, whatever that is?
No,
10,
I don't want to
20?
get into percent.
Or else just don't allow it.
Why are we opposed to single family? I mean, I know that there's a density thing, but aren't the cottages with those classified?
There's more than one
On what?
dwelling unit in each building. Those
No.
those hold anywhere from 2 to 4 developed units each.
And then if it was an individual
No,
single,
are you talking about the cottages in Dover?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
those are single family.
Well, they're not, we define single-family as one house on its own lot. Those are all
On a shared
lots.
lot.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
Okay.
that's what we should say.
Then say
'cause I don't think
multifamily.
that's what
Okay,
we're-
solve that by saying may.
But the thing is when we do single-family developments, like in the conservation, that's all one property, similar to what would be over on, whatchamacallit, Garish. Those are single-family homes.
Yeah, technically, they're not single-family,
It's a
but they.
condominium.
Yeah.
It's
They're
basically a
condominiums.
condominium,
And you can
as
sell,
defined in New Hampshire, weirdness,
and you can sell condominiums
individual.
Well,
that
that-
are, and even,
They're
like, they
detached.
look like apartments, but they're condominiums because it's for ownership.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're
Garrish
attached to each
Drive,
other.
they're technically not single-family in our ordinance, but they for all intents and purposes they are. You have a single unit, limited common area, condo. Yeah. I just think we don't want a conventional subdivision.
No, what we have multifamily dwelling here means any type of dwelling unit except for a single-family
Right, but
house.
if I want to sell them off and suddenly you have to enter a condominium relationship with 3% of my, and I'll tell you, those 3% aren't going to want to be a part of a condominium association
Right.
where somebody has 97% of the votes.
So Paul, why doesn't it work to have this restriction simply apply to those houses that we're going to have, or homes that we're going to have perpetuity?
I think it's
Attached
more,
to.
I just
Or-
think it, by the time you get the wording done, it becomes more confusing.
Or we could say, you know,
Give it, if you want to try it that way, give it a try, but it's going to be confusing.
or say that, you know, whatever the minimum percentage is workforce housing, or whatever you're counting toward it for your density, 60, 70, whatever, those are not single-family on their own lot. The other remaining 20, 30%, do whatever you want.
And when we're looking at the density, right, we spent the first half of this evening talking about how difficult it was level where this is affordable to develop, right? So that in itself is going to be pulling back the number of single families to the minimum number they need to get by, so that they can do the rest of the project, isn't it?
They
Well, it's
may,
also, you've got to build a road.
It's exactly.
But most of these are not going to be, they're going to be a private driveway, like
It's going to be
a townhouse development.
self-restricting.
I don't know, I think I
Well,
think
that's
that-
right, so it's not burdensome
I think
to,
I think this could be another conversation we could have. To purchase doesn't have to be a single-family home on its own lot. It could be a condominium
All right,
complex.
we'll leave that one open, I
And-
guess.
and so I think
You
there's-
can work on wording so that to get away from the may, and we can see how that looks.
Because you look at this Sophie development in Dover, it has 13 and four-unit townhomes. Now, this is a smaller property, but 8 rental units, blah, 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 blah. So it's got a combination on that street of single-family homes and multifamily. I mean,
I think it could be done.
And
Do
didn't
you-
we say we want to try to fill some of the gap of getting people into low-level, you know, the entry-level
well,
single-family
plus
homes?
it's true that if you don't have, if the developer thinks he needs that mix to make the workforce housing portion work, then I think we should just leave it open. But
All right, so we'll pick it up on
Yeah.
this topic again. If Michael would like to draft some language that avoids just changing that to the word may, he's welcome to. And we can pick it up next time.
And K is also.
And we're
not-
stopping.
okay.
Yeah, but so, and we have to realize that K is also unresolved, correct? Because we hopped over to K.
Most of what we after D is unresolved.
We popped to K and then popped back.
But some of the other, we've wrestled with some of the hardest stuff. I mean, buffers.
We didn't
You
talk
know,
about
that's
open space.
easier. Yeah,
Well-
that's easier stuff.
I don't-
It's-
all right.
It's the housing types
The
and
solar
density.
stuff, other business. We're moving on to item 11, other business.
Well, M is not here, and I think we want her for that discussion.
No, we don't, well,
I
she
think
was
we
gonna
can
raise
discuss
it.
it with,
there were multiple things, well, no, part of what you brought up, it wasn't just M that was
Oh,
bringing
but
this
it was
up.
also the solar
Yeah.
net crew metering.
There was this originally came to us for talking about the minor site process.
Right.
Okay, and then M wanted to expand it to this other issue. So we can at least talk about what we were initially going to review, which is, does it make sense for us to allow residential solar that is,
On the minor.
I'm looking at the wrong table.
Minor site.
There it is, so this one here. The
minor site for
minor site,
solar installation.
it was,
A freestanding,
freestanding-
multi-unit accessory.
yeah.
Yeah,
That
what's
was the
wrong with
initial thing, so let's at least put an answer to that, because that's separate
can do
from
that.
the other ones, right? Because this is the only one where we're actually talking about doing it as a minor site review. The other stuff was table of use items, right?
Yeah, so you could multi-unit accessory freestanding, you know,
So
church,
does
the
anybody-
George St. George's did something like
Does
that.
anybody have any concerns about letting accessory freestanding solar arrays for whatever?
I think it should be
Doesn't necessarily
minor.
have to be residential.
I think it
would
should
say
be
for
minor.
whatever. Be allowed to go to the minor site process first. And any concerns on that? I'm getting a weird eye. from
I just haven't formulated a complete opinion on it. So what we're resting on then is with minor site, there's no public hearing, right?
Right.
Right.
No, there is a public hearing.
There's
They're
a public
invited.
hearing, it's handled by
It's on site.
by the TRG?
It's
No, by the
handled
minor-
on site.
Yeah.
It's
Like a
it's
site
done
walk.
on site as by the minor site review committee.
Butters notified?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could also always get bumped, because we still have to get permission from the board to do it. It's not that much of a
It
savings.
really only, and is that, my understanding is it only takes one person, even in a butter,
Oh, yeah.
right, to
Yeah.
bump it up to the planning board if they're not happy with what's
I'm
occurring.
fine.
And that's state law.
I take no issue
You
with it.
can't get around that.
So-
What?
I don't have any issue with it going to,
All right, so that's just a site plan amendment. I'll bring it back, soon.
Right. So the other thing that was brought up was, so the St. George's array that we approved?
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
the write-up on that.
Yeah, so in reading the email chain from them, this all becomes of, well, they might, they'd like to go to a group nethering host, and that happens to be disallowed in their zone. So they have to go to a variance. Because at the time that we created the table uses, and we were saying where these small scale things should go, small group net metering hosts should go, we did not envision that they would fit in any of these other zones. But I guess solar panels are getting efficient enough that, and also, I seem to recall that at the time this went through, we had a couple of people on the planning board who were council members, who were really, really opposed to the idea that people might make money over excess electricity that they generate.
Yeah, yes.
And that was one of the reasons why we were so restrictive in what could go into residential.
No one makes money,
So,
because you burn it for your.
Chair, is it possible just to, if you know what a small group net metering host is?
I think
just-
there's a-
I've just never,
well, we defined it, see, we get to define it at whatever, we defined it as anything less than or equal to 100 kilowatts.
oh, that's why they say a small group net metering host has a maximum of 100 kilowatts, because that's what we defined it as.
Yes.
And why, if it's all about, if you can put it back there and it's following all the other rules, then why,
Fine.
then let them do it.
So,
Get the staff permit.
It's a small change, and it doesn't change the look, right? What we were really worried about is people don't want to see them. And somebody put a freestanding in their front lawn on Packers Fall Road.
so the question I'm going to
Yeah.
float out there, we have a lot on our plate
No.
right now. We got, what, 3 different zoning changes in the works that are already in our hands, a 4th on the table of uses. Do you want to send it back to the solar committee?
No, or you could, Paul, just make these, either these P, and do this with your table of utilities. We'll just take on your table of uses, just roll it into that. You're making
When we
those
do
changes
table of
now.
uses?
Yeah, you're doing table of uses now, just roll it into that.
Just roll it into that?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's, so
that's easy
all it would
peasy.
be,
That's easy.
I would suggest,
Well,
you know,
that's, yeah, except that you marked yellow, which implies to me that you think that there's a half a dozen lines here that we should look at.
What does
So
the
does
yellow
half a
mean,
dozen.
Michael?
Look
those
at
are just
it.
things that I think are worth looking at, but
I
you
went
may have
past
other
them.
things to look at. That was just.
And I'm just saying, if you really have this much for us to,
I would say.
are we the right, I mean,
yes
I mean, yes, we're the final deciders on this.
Committee if she wants, but it's,
It would,
probably, or you could make it
'cause I think
CU,
the
which is
Energy
always
Committee
safe.
could look at
No.
this. I think
When
the
you're
Energy
trying-
Committee could look at this and as part of one meeting, and then come back with a bunch of things that they feel would be appropriate. And as long as they don't back with Ps across the board everywhere, I'd be willing to go with that.
Yeah, maybe it's worth the Energy Committee having another look at the whole ordinance.
Yeah, I would,
I don't want to say the whole ordinance, I want to keep it to just the table of uses.
right, I'll-
Because if they do the whole, or if they start
No,
changing
you're
the
right,
other parts of the
you're right.
ordinance, then we have to get into it.
No,
deep.
no, no. I'll suggest that M and Matt Mathias, the chair, if they want to look at the table of uses, feel free and they can
And
bring
if
that
they
to
can
us.
get
Bring
that
your
back to us while we're still working with our table of uses, which they should have no problem doing, then we'll just roll it together then.
Yeah, that sounds good.
that sounds to make sense. That makes sense.
You guys are good.
All
I
right.
did that in about 7 minutes. What's next on the agenda? Review of new minutes. Oh, we don't have any.
No minutes.
Are we still talking business? New business? Is that what that was under?
That was under other business? Do you have other business?
Well, I do. all right,
Okay.
Because this has come up in the past, and I encountered it tonight. I thought we were having a big public hearing. when I-
Major talk with our counselor who is here,
I spoke
Counselor
to
Lund.
2 counselors about it when
And-
when
I
Mr.
believe this is either the third or fourth time this has come up. And there's been talks of a solution, but nothing has occurred.
Yeah,
think
we're
it's-
going to, and I'm expecting our counselors
Yeah.
to bring this up at the next council meeting.
You need to be
I
very
might as well-
turf.
I'm just going to send a
Okay.
message, email.
I'm gonna send-
We need to
met
bring it
with-
up.
We have met with Tideline several times.
I don't
Yeah,
think
well,
It has
no,
nothing to
I
do
don't-
with
No,
Red
but they've had something,
ain't
they
working.
put signs
has-
up and stuff.
That ain't working.
no.
Maybe it's
No,
not.
It
no,
has
what,
nothing
because
to
here's
do
the
with
problem,
Tideline.
here's the problem, this is why talking to Tide solved this problem.
It's nothing to do with that.
Because on first and third Wednesdays, it's okay. There's no town business occurring here. But on second and fourth Wednesdays, there is. On certain Thursdays, there is.
On certain
All right,
days.
we need to be able to post something in our parking lot that says, stay out, that can go out there that says, public town meeting tonight,
No parking.
No
Town
parking
meeting,
for
yeah.
others, for,
business only parking
yeah.
type deal.
Simple.
that's
Talking,
probably what
Tideline has no control over this. They can't monitor.
They put
and-
up signs and stuff.
No, but that
And they've got
doesn't
extra
help.
parking at the garage.
Because if we
No, I
don't
know.
tell people there's a meeting
But the
going on,
sales
they
sign
don't know they can't
Well,
stay
that-
here.
that
It's
seems to make
easy.
sense.
Yeah, we already did this.
All right.
Look at where you started. No, that's,
Are we still
No,
on,
we
are we
were
still on
ranting.
camera?
Oh, yeah.
yes.
So just to be clear to the public, so they understand, we're talking about that all the parking lot was taken up tonight.
Yes,
Yes,
and
there
I'm
was no
all the way
parking.
down the
We,
street.
there was,
I'm
We-
illegally
and
parked.
We do think Tideline is an excellent addition. This
We
is an
love-
operational thing, we just gotta
Exactly.
work on with them,
Where they can park.
Exactly.
where they can park.
It's not their concern.
And you took the
it's
last
our
spot in the
concern.
parking lot. I went, all of them were gone. I had to park all the way down there, and then somebody must have
Rob
left, because
took
he
the last
slid,
one?
he slid
Well,
right into it as I'm walking up.
and Peyton did the same thing.
I got lucky too. What's the problem? I didn't have a problem.
Yeah, you did, you know what? Yeah, when I was driving
on
around the
from-
second time, you
All right,
came
all right,
in.
all right,
it
we
took
have
my-
something.
As a member of the agricultural board, I bring something to their attention,
Oh,
some type of fertilizer.
right, so I have to take a look at what my email, so, yeah,
If you don't need it on the record, that's fine. We can do it.
everybody knows what's going on. As we were, when I was doing my homework for tonight, some of the stuff on the table of uses, so I've asked Tom to contact to ask the Agriculture Committee if they have any views regarding the use of fertilizer on lawns and athletic fields. Because in my mind, that, and to try to get Culture Commission happens to be in line with the Conservation Commission. And if they are, then that makes it great, because then suddenly we can, maybe as we're looking at the table of uses, be a little more fine-tuned in where we put things
What's
like that, like
allowed.
outdoor athletic facilities and recreational facilities and things, in terms of our zoning. So I did that. I'm hoping to get some feedback. It'd be, an excellent opportunity, if you remember, to ask the Conservation Commission the same thing. Is there, if those are things we'd like to restrict out of certain neighborhoods. I know we don't want them in our buffers, the wetland buffers. The new amendments are trying to address that there. But if we can do it at the zone level as well, that might make sense.
Allow in those zones that may have the potential of being,
Yes.
Are we meeting in July?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
2 meetings.
Okay.
Regular meetings. Oh, also on the table of uses that I sent you, we didn't get to tonight, I had the wrong table of uses, so some of the things on there are incorrect, but I'll
Send us a new one?
Send it
I'll
over.
send you a new one, yeah. Because it had like animal lives, Paul pointed this out to me, animal husbandry in the rural zone, and it wasn't really what was decided.
Animal husbandry.
I'll send it up the correct one.
Oh, one of the things that, this is other business that Concom's looking at as well, is creating a list of invasives that they should stay away from, developers should stay away from in their planting plans.
Well, we have the list, but they're thinking
Does
of
anybody actually
adding it.
plant Japanese knotweed?
Well, no, but there's commercially available shrubs and the like.
Like
that-
Siberian
species.
elm came up.
No, yeah. That,
Is that invasive, Siberian elm?
that's good. All right,
never even heard
anything more for other business?
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that, Tom.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Has anyone seen a score of the game?
We
yet?
are adjourned.